Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching first part of What If Naruto received help from Avatar Aang after Gaara Retrieval arc. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Always taking no time. Let's start the story.
Amidst the many interlocking trees, he strolled through the well-known forest. Just above his ankles was the cool, calming water. He leaned down and stroked the water's surface, thinking, "It's been a long time since I've been here." The water used to come up higher. He smiled to himself. The water in front of him started to ripple. As soon as he finished thinking, before him came an old man with long white hair tied in a Fire Nation knot and a dark red robe trimmed in gold. Roku greeted him. "Aang, it's definitely been a long time." With his hands on his hips, Aang grinned and said, "It has, Roku, but I don't recall ever being called here before. This is definitely different." Roku replied with a grin, "This is usually not the way of spirits, but an interesting situation has come up and your help is needed." Aang straightened his posture and asked, "What needs to be done?" with a serious expression. One of his hands was raised. "Nothing at the moment. It's more of a proposition, meaning you are well within your rights to decline." "I'm a little confused. How can I decline something the spirits, are asking me to do?" Aang said, scratching his head. Roku gave a sober response, "Because it's nothing that pertains to our world." "Our world? You mean the world I live in right now?" Aang says, his eyes widening. "That's correct. In fact, the problem lies in a complete different dimension." Aang found himself speechless as a second figure materialized beside Roku. "This is Kami, one of the deities in the other dimension," Roku said, gesturing with his right hand. She was a stunning woman with big blue eyes set in creamy white skin and long, silky, chocolate brown hair that fell to her ankles. There was something about her that made him think of Katara. Kami stood rigid and straight, her hair and the silk white wraparound dress she wore flooding lightly as if a breeze were blowing. "Hello Avatar. Roku is allowing me to explain the situation that's happening in my world, and then you can decide whether or not you wish to help us," Kami said. With a cautious nod, Aang said, "I'll listen." "Excellent," said Kami. "My world is on the brink of war. My precious children are trying to fight against a foe that for all intents and purposes shouldn't exist. In my world there are 9 powerful creatures called tailed beasts. They were separated long ago and living free in the world. But unfortunately, they have been contained into human hosts called Jinchurikis because of their evil nature and other reasons. An underground organization called the Akatsuki has been collecting my precious beasts in order to create one all-powerful creature. This should not be so, but my human children have been neglecting their Jinchurikis, which is why many of them have been captured already. We need your help, Avatar. As an all-powerful being yourself, you can help my children ward off this coming evil and restore my 9 beasts to their human hosts. This will create an equal balance as there should be." Aang was left speechless and wide-eyed after Kami concluded her brief speech. "You won't be alone," Aang said as he returned his focus to Kami. "You will be given allies who are loyal to restoring the world to its proper sense of peace, but until you reach a decision I cannot give you more information than that. What I've told you already might have been too much. Sharing things about other worlds is not how the heavens, or in your case the spirit world, is supposed to operate." Kami smiled as she looked at Roku. "Wait, are you saying that the spirit world and your heavens are connected?" was the last thing that came out of Aang's voice. Nodding, Roku responded, "Aang, the spirit world is home to many spirits and is not limited to one world or dimension." He asked, a little tense, "So I could walk into another world's heaven, right now?" "No," replied Kami, "you would not be able to find it, and your spirit world is large. Why do you think I can visit you right now? I was allowed to come here and consult with you. The deities in my dimension and the spirits here have agreed to this meeting." Aang looked from Kami to Roku and asked incredulously, "You got every single spirit's consensus?" "No, only a select few. We consulted the spirits who have been around the longest or are considered most important, namely Ko and you," Roku replied. Quietly, he said, "You?" She agreed to this? Nodded. She believed this would be proper to bring to your attention, but ultimately the decision is yours since you will be the one putting your life in danger. Aang approached one of the trees and took a seat on a root that was above the water. He buried his head in his hands and pondered. "How am I going to refuse this? How am I unable to? Why is a deity from a different dimension requesting my assistance? I have a wife and a child, and I've already fought my war. One have to defend my own world." With a heavy sigh, he rubbed his bald head and said, "But it's been 6 years since my world needed protection. How will I tell them about this? To Katara? She will want to come, but she is unable to do so now that I have a family to consider. What if I were to die in this alternate reality?" Without glancing at the 2 ghosts, Aang questioned, "Would I be able to bend?" The answer was, "Yes, your powers will follow you into this next world," Kami said. "What about others? I know a few people who wouldn't let me come by myself." Aang sighed once more and glanced up at the 2 of them. who appeared to be 10 years older than he was. Cammy's eyes narrowed slightly as she said, "Only a select few would be allowed. You would not be able to bring an army with you," but she managed to keep her voice clear of annoyance. Aang exhaled once more before rising. "Without a doubt I can name 3 people who would come without a second's hesitation. Katara, Sokka, and Suki Toph would debate about it, but I think ultimately she would come. This doesn't even count Appa and Momo would I would bring as well." "Would your exit plan work with that many?" Roku asked Cammy, who was looking at Aang intently. "It shouldn't be an issue if he isn't dead or exhausted when they need him. In addition, since you are a part of this boy, it should make the transition easier," she replied, keeping her gaze fixed on Aang. Nodded. "I suggest you speak with those closest to you before making your decision. I know you and Katara have a son and he needs to be a priority." Aang smiled and said, "Give me a week then call me back, I'll have my answer for you then." "We will. See you in a week," Cammy said with a smile before vanishing in a puff of smoke. Aang looked at Roku. "I heard your thoughts just now and you were justified in your reasoning. Believe me when I say that I wouldn't have even recommended you if I knew this would lead to your death and would upset the delicate balance of our own world. I believe you can be successful, especially if you bring them along with you." A warm smile spread across Aang's face as he said, "I firmly believe that I can do anything with them by my side." Roku gave a nod. Aang said suddenly, "I would like to ask a favor of you." "Anything," said Roku. "If we do decide to go and help out this other world, watch over my son. Don't let anything happen to him, please." Aang's face became more serious. "Know this, that we spirits will protect your son should you choose to leave this dimension to perform a favor for another spirit, not to mention you have many new friends and family that will also protect him as well," Roku soothed. "I need to go home now. My wife and I need to have a long conversation before we talk to the others," Aang said, nodding some of his stress-relieving words. Aang was beaming back at Roku as he nodded and waved his hand. Aang saw darkness when he opened his eyes. He was in his meditative posture, taking in his surroundings as his eyes acclimatized. He was in one of the many places the monks used to meditate, the Southern Air Temple. He recalled having a strong desire to meditate, and he went to a peaceful location after making a brief remark to Katara. Additionally, he recalled the events of his spirit world journey, but he was at a loss for words to describe them to her. Since her opinion was the most important to him and he knew he would need her assistance with whatever decision he made, he knew he had to tell her before anyone else. He got to his feet slowly, brushed off his trousers, and bounded back up to the temple's main corridor. He started to walk slowly toward his bedroom. As he walked on the smooth, hard marble floor, it reverberated. He repeatedly reenacted the scenes in his mind in an attempt to think of the appropriate opening line. As he pushed open the wooden door, all thoughts fled his mind. Katara was up, reading in bed by candlelight. "So learn anything interesting?" she asked, looking up as he entered the room. "I don't even know where to begin," Aang said softly as he climbed into bed beside her after taking off his sash, shirt, and shoes. Knowing that the sensation calmed him, she closed her book and gently nudged him to lie on her lap while she heard the uneasiness in his voice. "Just start at the beginning and tell me what happened," she said, stroking his arrow. Aang inhaled deeply and steadily before beginning his tale. Halfway through, Katara's hand stopped moving, but Aang carried on speaking. When he looked up after he was done, she was shocked and had wide eyes. He looked at her and asked in a low voice, "What should I do?" Katara froze in shock at what she heard. Another world requesting his assistance? It was incomprehensible. Her honest response was, "I don't know. Yeah, I feel the same," Aang said, closing his eyes in an attempt to calm himself. She questioned, "Why? Why you?" He sighed. "Roku said he wouldn't have even asked if he knew I wouldn't be successful. He said he wouldn't let the balance of our world be put at stake if he knew this conflict would end with failure and my death." The word death caused Katara to uncontrollably shut down, saying, "To think something like this, I mean think about it, this is impossible space-time traveling, that just doesn't happen." As Aang laughed to himself, "I know, right, and we thought being an all-powerful avatar was the coolest thing." As she began to laugh with him, Katara exhaled sharply and said, "I guess you're right. I honestly don't know what we should do. Tenzin is only 2 years old. Who knows how long we'd be gone for," she said, leaning down to give him a gentle forehead kiss. Lamely, "Katara, I wouldn't want you to go," Aang began. "Don't even go there, Aang. You knew the moment you started talking and thinking about going that I would come with you. Nothing separates us. Remember, no secrets, no separations, no nothing. We made a vow, we stay together." Recalling their passionate wedding vows, Aang grinned and said, "You're right. I was just thinking about Tenzin. I don't want him to be alone, not this young." Aang turned to face her and sat up with a direct gaze. Katara asked, "You're going to go, aren't you?" For what seemed like hours, they remained motionless, reading each other's body language to determine when he would respond. Yes, I think I will go, Aang. They did say you could turn down the offer and nobody would think little of you. You don't have to do this, Katara said, noticing the strain in his eyes and the hesitancy in his voice. Coming from the woman who is selfless and always trying to help and heal others, Aang said, reaching up to caress her smooth cheek. She turned to kiss his palm, softening his face. Katara grinned. I love you, and right now I'm gonna have to agree with Sokka, you are too compassionate for your own good sometimes. Aang chuckled when she said, I love you Katara, more than anything in this world. Leaning in, he gave her a tender kiss. A tiny knock on the door prompted her to return his kiss. Come in Tenzin, called Katara. A young boy with gray eyes and dark brown hair entered. His skin tone was lighter than Katara's but a shade darker than Aang's. Mama, he uttered while raising arms holding him against her chest. Katara lifted him up. She asked him, not really expecting a response, are you okay baby? He grinned and said, Mama, water, to his father. Katara reached for a half-full cup by their bed. She said to him, here, have a drink, and then we're going back to bed. Tenzin held the cup in both hands and took tiny sips before Katara got up to take him to the restroom and back to bed. He completed the remaining tasks. Aang stood up and went to look at the full moon outside the window. Shutting his eyes, he allowed Yu's pull to calm his slightly tense mood. A faint breeze reverberated in a steady rhythm around the temple. He inhaled deeply once more and concentrated on the throbbing breeze, allowing the freedom of the air to transport him. For a brief but priceless moment he sensed Katara returning to the room, and she shuffled across the floor before waking him from his reverie by putting her hand around his well-defined torso. Whispering, I'm with you, whatever you decide. How did I get so lucky to have someone like you? Aang asked, turning around and squeezing her tightly against his body. With a smile on his chest, Katara said, you know I ask myself the same thing all the time. Aang wrote 4 letters the following morning. One of them was to the Southern Water Tribe, requesting that Pakku, Gran, and Chief Hakoda meet at Zuko's palace in 5 days. The second and third letters were sent to Sokka and Suki, who were in Kyoshi, and Toph, who was in jailing. The fourth went to Zuko and informed him that he needed to speak with him and the other people who would be coming right away. Attaching the letters to the 4 fastest flyers, Katara made her way to the roost, where 10 messenger hawks were always available. They spent the remainder of that day getting ready to travel to the Fire Nation. In order to avoid having a lot of cleanup to do when they returned, Katara packed all of their clothes into the few bags they had and then served up all of the perishable fruits and vegetables. Considering Aang's behavior and his explanation of the situation, I'm assuming this is going to take a long time, she thought. After everything was to her satisfaction, she settled in for the evening and packed some snacks for their flight the following day. While Tenzin was laughing aloud, Aang and Tenzin were wrestling. She delighted in seeing her husband and son play happily as they rolled around in the dirt. Momo would occasionally fly down and divert Aang's attention, enabling Tenzin to scale his body and cling to him. Aang would always fall over and act as though he was knocked out to exaggerate the gentle blows his son would deliver. Tenzin realized his father was always lying after just 2 fake knockout fights. He was a very bright kid, and since Aang was a prodigy growing up, Katara figured their son would inherit some of that intelligence. Tenzin had just started to be tickled by Aang when Momo came to his rescue, and he squealed, "Base," as he rushed into Katara's lap. Momo chased after a giant grape that Aang tossed from the tray Katara had previously brought out. Aang crept over to where Katara was sitting with Tenzin frantically clinging to her neck while the lemur was distracted. As he stalked closer, Aang teased, "How many times do I have to tell you that Mom is never the base?" As Tenzin saw his father's smile widen, he squealed and yelled, "Mama, Mama," as he attempted to approach her. Katara simply grinned and giggled as she attempted, but was unable, to hold her son now that Aang was right beside them. His hand started to creep up her leg in the direction of their son when his father discovered the ticklish area on the back of his knee. He squealed once more. Aang didn't stop until Katara told him to, saying their son was having trouble breathing. Before he knew it, Tenzin had fallen directly on top of Aang on his stomach, and Aang had fallen on his back, laughing to himself. Katara exclaimed, "Tenzin," as Aang huddled, gasping from the unexpected shock. When she noticed that Tenzin was attempting to tickle Aang back, she burst out laughing before she could reprimand him. Tenzin had no idea that Aang was amused by his attempts rather than being genuinely ticklish. Katara bathed Tenzin before putting him to bed for the night as the sun sank behind the Patola mountain range. She then took a bath on her own before getting into her husband's bed. He felt her tuck herself in while he lay quietly on top of their covers, eyes closed. He leaned over until he was hovering over her body as she lay down beside him, and then he gave her a quick, lingering kiss. Unsatisfied, Katara gently lowered his face back against hers with her hand and gave him a slightly more intense kiss. Aang kept shifting until he was standing on top of her. As Aang's lips moved down her jaw and neck, her hands gradually moved from his face to his chest. Following a few passionate kisses, Aang withdrew and slipped beneath the covers, eliminating an extraneous barrier between them. Katara spread her legs wide to make room for him, which allowed him to settle in comfortably. He returned to his loving caresses, stroking her neck and cheek with his lips. With a sigh, Katara embraced him and reveled in his attentions. As their desire took over, their bodies started to gradually warm up. In just a few seconds, they had stripped each other, wanting nothing more than to feel their heated flesh against one another and never be able to separate. With a satisfying gasp, he finally got inside her, and she lifted her hips to give him a deeper suck. They needed this gentle care but didn't want to wake their sleeping son. So they loved each other in private. They didn't want her to become pregnant in the situation. So Aang made sure he pulled out before giving her his seed. However, before the improbable and unexpected happened to them, they both felt the need to be whole. They departed for the Fire Nation on Appa an hour after dawn. The following day they arrived in the capital late at night, and Zuko, Mai, and Iroh met them at the palace entrance. "So what's so important that you needed all of these people to come here for?" replied Zuko. Aang murmured, "It's difficult to explain and I would rather it only happen once. Can these questions wait until everyone else was here?" After glancing at his friend and student, Zuko nodded and said, "Well, at least Lily will be thrilled to see Tenzin." "Yes, he's been talking about her ever since we left," Katara said with a smile while holding their sleeping son. Zuko ushered them into their room. "Since you're here, would you mind sitting in on this discussion? Your input would be greatly appreciated," Aang said to Iroh before they turned in. Iroh gave a bow. "I can delay my return journey for a few days." When everyone finally showed up, it had been 5 days on the Earth Kingdom's mainland. Sokka and Suki met up with Toph and traveled to the capital in the same boat because Zuko had ordered it. The three had always been treated like Fire Nation nobility. Soon after, Hakoda and the others showed up after a hearty meal prepared by Zuko. He and his guests moved to a more comfortable sitting room to continue the conversation. Lily and Tenzin were led from the room to their beds. "All right. What's so damned important that you had to have all of us here together?" Sokka asked without hesitation after the door had closed. With their eyes fixed on Aang, everyone abruptly stopped talking as Katara gave him a comforting back rub. He leaned forward and placed his head in his hands. Zuko inquired nervously, You didn't have a vision or something, did you?" "No," Aang responded with a sigh and looked up. "What I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room. It's not like anything I have ever done before, and certainly no avatar or any person in this world has ever done." His words caused the room to pause as everyone tried to understand what he was saying, paying close attention to how he stressed the word, "this." Toph said, "Way to beat around the bush, spit it out already." Twinkled toes, while maintaining a casual demeanor despite her internal trepidation. "What Aang is trying to say is don't interrupt him while he's explaining this. It's going to be slightly difficult to understand, but hear him out before asking questions," Katara said. Everybody gave a nod. Aang inhaled deeply before starting his story. He began by feeling the need to meditate, then he went into his full spirit world experience, and finally he concluded with a brief conversation he had with Katara. As they all took in what he had just said, the room fell silent for 5 full minutes. Surprised, Suki said, "Are you sure? They want you to go to another world?" "Yes," Aang replied, staring at her. "This is in a completely different dimension and has nothing to do with this world." "This is freaky," Toph said suddenly, shaking her head while keeping her feet firmly planted so she could sense the reactions of the room. Hakoda inquired, "Have you accepted?" "Not yet. Roku will call me back in 2 days and I will give my answer then. I wanted everyone who I'm close to be here and help me make this decision because it's not only me who is going to be affected by this, it's also affecting my family and my friends." "You were right, child," said Gran. "If you leave I know Katara will follow you. What are you going to do with your son?" "He would stay at the Southern Water Tribe. Roku promised me that he would be protected by spirits should anything come up," Aang replied. With his gaze shifting from Iroh to Zuko, Pakku questioned, "Are we expecting anything bad to happen here?" "Nothing from our end. Ozai and Azula followers have been apprehended and they are both unable to really pose a threat anymore," replied Zuko. Iroh came to the conclusion, "The White Lotus hasn't heard of anything brewing." A sigh reverberated throughout the room. Sokka said, "So I take it you're going," without really posing a query. Looking at his brother-in-law, Aang said, "I haven't made up my mind yet, but..." Katara smirked and said, "Sokka, you should already know him well enough to see through that roundabout answer." Count me in. Sokka smiled. Me as well, Suki said, holding Sokka's hand tightly. With a grateful smile, Aang said, I knew you two would come even if I told you no. Gran looked at Katara and said, Katara. She resolutely replied, I'm never leaving his side, this is no different. Reaching out, Aang took her hand and planted a kiss on it. With a slightly strained voice, Hakoda said, even though nothing is happening that concerns your immediate attention, things may develop while you're gone. I know, Aang replied, and I'm not sure how long I'll be gone according to Kami. The war is brewing so it could start when we get there or months from now. It's like you said, Roku would never have brought this to your attention had he not believed that you would succeed and come back to us, Gran said with confidence. The state of our world during the 100-year war was terrible. If this world is going through the same hardships, I think they could use a person like you. Someone who unconditionally loves and gives his all for the sake of others, not to mention you'll have the ones who helped you stop this war with you. Your partners and heroes of our own world. The decision is yours and I know you will watch each other's backs. I think you should go. With her head held high and her eyes locked with Aang's, Katara grinned at her grandmother. She grinned and reflected, I'll also get to spend some fun time with my great-grandson. That made Katara laugh, and Aang grinned. Zuko snarled, I wish I could go with you, and started to pace. You have your duty here, I wasn't expecting you to come, Aang replied. Sokka said, what about you, Toph? I don't know, I just started my academy and now to just leave for who knows how long. Nobody else can teach my style of bending, but, she said, leaning her head back and growling. Aang waited for her to arrive, but he was prepared to accept if she didn't. I think it could be a very interesting experience to see something new even if I can't actually see, she said with a smirk. I mean, think about it, how often does an opportunity like this come up? With a laugh, Aang said, thank you Toph, besides we don't know what kind of world we're going to write. Aang replied. Right, well how many people do you know can control elements like we do? Even here in our own world not everyone is bender. Sure, these people might have some crazy type of power and whatnot, but so do we. With her hands behind her head, she looked blankly at the ceiling as she concluded her speech. Sokka jokingly said, I knew there was a reason we kept you around, Toph. Yeah, she said, absently waving her hand. Iroh inquired, how long until you leave? I'm not sure, I'll know once I tell them my answer, and since it's in the affirmative Kami will give me more details about the world like who and what, but I want to make sure nobody here in this world knows I'm gone. They know we would never leave Tenzin, and if there are supporters out there or people just looking for ransom, I want people to think we are still here, Aang continued. Yes, this has to be kept with utmost secrecy, Iroh said. I shall inform the order only as a precautionary measure, and if you, Hakoda, need any extra eyes for the youngster we will happily accommodate. Aang gave a grateful nod. As of now the Avatar is taking some time off to visit the Southern Water Tribe. Any requests asked of him will be suspended until further notice. Zuko enacted his order. All requests will be accepted by Fire Lord Zuko or Chief Hakoda. Hakoda replied, I supposed it wouldn't do to say one of them was sick, since we have very skilled healers now, and with the Republic City under construction people shouldn't need to see him around. I agree, said Pakku after firmly grasping Katara's hand. Aang gave her a gentle kiss, allowing his lips to rest on the delicate curve of her hand. Her eyes shone with confidence as he looked up into them, but his revealed a bottomless pit of nerves. To calm his nerves, she tightened her hold on him and ran her thumb over his fingers. Sokka, Suki, and Toph departed on Appa the following day in order to return home and collect their belongings, since they will be staying with allies. Aang advised packing primarily clothing and other necessities. They would return in 3 days, Sokka informed him. The following day, Aang experienced the summoning once more. Katara accompanied him to the Fire Temple, which is close to the palace, so that she could be informed as soon as he completed his journey. He got to the same woods where he had been called before, and he waited calmly for Roku and Kami to show up. First to appear was Roku. I trust you were able to make a decision? Asked the man. Yes, I have, and we're going. Sokka, Suki, Toph, Katara, and I, Aang replied. As another figure emerged, Roku nodded his head and grinned when Kami appeared. She had a dejected, hopeless appearance rather than a royal one. She met his gaze and said, So young Avatar, what is your decision? I'm going, and I'm bringing Sokka, Suki, Toph, and Katara. Appa and Momo will be coming as well since they're always with me, he politely replied. A broad smile spread across Kami's face as she said, That's great news and thank you for accepting. Aang grinned with happiness. I think I'm going to need more information about your world, like what and who I'm looking for. I don't want to befriend the wrong people, if you know what I mean. Pulling a scroll from inside her sleeve, Kami nodded and said, This contains all the information you need to know beforehand. You will learn more once you encounter the Leaf Ninja and are taken in their home. Leaf, ninja? He questioned doubtfully. Cammy gave him a grin. Leaf ninja originate from the village hidden in the leaves in the land of fire. They will be your contacts that you will befriend. Where you will be sent has changed. The man you were supposed to meet has been sent off on an emergency mission. How long until you and your friends are ready? Aang replied to her, they should be here tomorrow so we can leave the day after. Cammy replied, that may be cutting events close. I was originally going to place you a few miles away from the Leaf Village, but one of my precious hosts has been captured and they may need your help. Stay away from anyone wearing black robes with red clouds printed on them. They are the enemy. Her voice took on a serious tone, and Aang nodded. One last question, how will we tell the Leaf Ninja apart from other ninjas? He said. They will be wearing a headband with a leaf pattern on it. Your contacts will be a three-man group. The leader will have silver hair. One will have pink and the other yellow hair. Aang scratched his head and said, are they natural? Yellow, silver, and pink. With a laugh, Cammy said, yes, my world is not restricted to the normal hair colors, just as your world is not restricted to its inventive creatures. Her voice echoed like wind chimes. Aang grinned. Well, this seems like it's going to be an interesting trip. You wouldn't happen to know how long we will be gone, do you? Cammy murmured, no, but with the progression of events the way they are, my guess is war will start in about a year, maybe less. A year? Aang had to hold back his gasp, but his eyes told him otherwise. We might be gone for a year. Aang, do not worry, your son and our world will be at peace, Roku said after noticing his transformation. What about the Republic City? I'm required to be there for its grand opening, he began. Well, unfortunately some of the building plans are going to need to be revised due to instability in the foundations, so that will set them back another 3 years, Roku calmly stated. Okay. I'm going to miss Tenzin, Aang sighed in a semi-relieved tone. I'm sorry about your son, but if he is anything like his father I can tell he's a strong boy, laughed Cammy. Aang smiled back at her, saying, thank you, he's smart and strong, but from a father's perspective, I'm definitely going to miss him. With the scroll in her hand, Cammy raised it and sent it gently in Aang's direction. He accepted it and opened his hand. Cammy bowed her head slightly before vanishing. It's about that time when you should be heading back. Spend as much time with your son as you need, but I'll be seeing you in my world in 2 days, she said. Aang and Roku were standing together. Typically items received in the spirit world are only to be seen here, but since this is a special circumstance, place it inside your clothing so it doesn't get lost in the mix. How are we going to do this? Aang obeyed. That's already been arranged. You remember your old friend the lion turtle? Roku said with a smile. I take it I'm to take everyone to that spot again and then you're going to transport us? Asked Aang, laughing and nodding. Yes, he will meet you on the outskirts of the Southern Air Temple. There you will call me and using your power to enter into the spirit world, and you will cross the dimensions and be placed in Cammy's designated location. She will meet us there to make sure you are placed in the correct location, Roku said. And to return home? Do they have a similar place there in the Fire Country? They don't, but her people are. Let's just say some have extraordinary gifts and getting back home won't be a problem, Roku replied. What if this person is killed? I'm sorry, I should have asked her this, but, Aang said, nodding slightly uncomfortably. Fortunately, the person you will need is one powerful man, and Cammy has reassured us that he will be there to send you home. Aang nodded once more, not entirely happy with his response, but still having faith in him. Aang was once again in the Fire Nation Temple when Roku waved his hand at him, and Katara was sitting right in front of him, watching him curiously. To keep everyone together, they traveled by boat and arrived at the Southern Air Temple late in the evening. Since they would be departing early in the morning, they all chose to sleep on the small beach. Even though Aang offered them all a room up at the temple with Tenzin between him and Katara, Aang dozed off. The following morning was difficult. They didn't want to startle Tenzin too much, so the farewells were tense. The only person who didn't cry was Pakku. A year won't be too long. When you get back, Tenzin will still be the same as he is now, Gran comforted Katara as she wiped away her tears. As Katara's tears fell steadily down her cheeks, she said, just be safe, please all of you. With a white handkerchief in hand, Gran wiped her granddaughter's eyes and said, I should be saying that to you after all. You guys are heading into trouble. Katara laughed with her and smiled. Following their farewells, Aang and Katara stood with their cherished son between them. Aang kissed Tenzin's forehead and said, we will miss you, Tenzin, you are a brave boy. After wiping away the kiss, Tenzin grinned and said, I love you, Dada. Katara touched his nose and said, you listen to your grandpas and your grandma, don't you whine or get angry at them. Okay mama, he said with a smile. At that moment, Gran approached and said, come on, my little child, they have to go. Tenzin took her hand and waved, bye-bye, as the ship left the earthen dock Toph had made and sailed away from them. They all waved at it. Aang muttered, that's the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Jokingly, harder than taking away Loser Lord's firebending, Sokka said. That was easy compared to this, Aang grinned. Toph cracked her knuckles and said, well, do you see our ride or do we have to fly around to find him? If you see a forest of trees moving in the ocean then we will know he's here, Aang replied after securing all of their possessions and boarding Appa. They all took to the skies. Here, Aang said, passing Sokka the scroll he had obtained in the spirit world, should contain a map and information about the world we are visiting. Right, he replied as he opened it. Aang remained perched on Appa's head, searching for the lion turtle, while Suki and Katara examined it. Suki muttered, interesting, aloud. What? Inquired Katara. Well, it seems that the basic layout of their world is similar to ours. There are 5 great nations: fire, earth, water, wind, and lightning. We have 4: fire, earth, air, and water. Even though some things are different, like the ninjas we're supposed to meet are from fire country, but their symbol is a leaf. That's true, agreed Katara. Not only that, but based on some limited information here, it seems that their chakra allows them to bend. It's all starting to make sense why they asked you, Aang. With all these similarities you kind of are the perfect person for the job, Sokka said. Sighing, Aang said, when you put it that way, I guess I am. But we're not in this alone. The leaf ninjas are going to be helping us. I mean, who knows, maybe we won't have to do much except be a presence there, Katara said. Aang gave his wife a smile and a wink, saying, I love you. Back to her smile, she said, love you too. Toph sighed, okay, I know you guys are all married but me. But please, virgin ears here, I won't tolerate makeout sessions and especially sex. Despite their laughter, everyone paid attention to her. After 30 minutes, Aang's expression darkened when he noticed a familiar sight just west of the Patola mountain range. Over his shoulder, he called, he's here, while everyone else looked. A head rose slowly from under the sea, and Appa sank and hovered just in front of the enormous shell of trees. Aang got up and spoke to him. With a low bow, he said, thank you for allowing us to do this. The lion turtle informed him, my pleasure, Avatar. In fact, I came up with the idea to use my shell as your point of exit and return. After all the help you gave me with ending the war and now this, I can never thank you enough. He sank his head back into the water and said, thank me by doing your duty and helping the people who need you. You have my word, pledged Aang. He led Appa upward and touched down a short distance from their position. Close to the top of the shell, Aang waved the others over after making his way to the center of the empty hexagon. Looks like we're going to need to be on Appa for all of us to fit properly, Aang said. Last time I was here, this thing seemed huge. Katara remarked, you were 12 the last time you were here. It's been so long. Alright, no time to reminisce. I know we're all nervous, but let's get this over with, Sokka said. Aang sat down on the hexagon's side and said, right, calling Roku while the others boarded Appa, who was standing beside the hexagon. Upon greeting Roku, Aang said, we're all here and ready to go. Very well, Kami will be performing the time-space technique while I mediate and ensure your powers are transferred as well, replied Roku. With a hint of anxiety, Katara questioned, will we all be able to bend in this other world? Turning to face her, Roku said, yes, that much has been assured. Katara grinned and kept looking at Roku when she realized that this was the first time she had ever seen a spirit in person. Following the emotions that flashed across her face, Roku grinned. Roku responded to the unasked question by stating, there is another one coming and we will be the only spirits you will ever see the rest of your lives, while also glancing at Suki and Sokka. Toph let out a dramatic sigh, too bad I'm missing out on it, which caused the former Avatar to laugh. I see they are all here, Kami said, turning to smile at everyone on Appa. This is the only time you will see me, so please join your friends now, Avatar. At that moment, another presence appeared, encased in the same blue light as Roku. In compliance, Aang leapt to Appa's head and guided him to the center of the hexagon. Then he declared, we're ready. Kami nodded her head and started making different hand gestures as Roku floated over to the warriors. She closed her eyes intently. Create an air shield encasing the entire body of your bison, he said. Aang leapt onto the saddle and followed instructions. Momo sat on Katara's lap while Toph and the others held on to the saddle's sides. Kami's eyes opened in an instant and were propelled into the air at a terrifying rate. Aang felt another power enhancing his shield. As he focused hard on it, he glanced over and saw that Roku was also holding out his hands to help him steady the shield. Aang could tell they were passing through their spirit world after being drawn through a wormhole. A moment later, Aang's vision was reduced to blue. Roku commanded, release, and Aang stopped bending as Roku vanished. After a few seconds of registering the fall, Appa suddenly flexed his tail and legs to keep them upright after taking in everything for a moment. Aang helped Appa slow their descent and turned back to face his friends. Breathless, he asked, "Are you all okay?" "I thought I got over the terrifying sensation of falling, but I guess not," Toph said, his arms firmly attached to the saddle. "I think we're all okay," Katara said. Panting Suki said, "Yeah, we're good," as she ran her hands through her hair. Sokka questioned, "What just happened?" "Are you really asking that question?" snorted Katara. He raised his hands in the air and said, "I know what happened, but I want to know what really happened. We traveled through the spirit world, and when we reached the end of our own, we jumped into this world's heaven. Roku told me to release, and when I did, I realized we were falling, so it meant that we were out of their heaven and into the world," Aang responded. Katara proposed, looking over the saddle's edge. "Let's land somewhere and try to figure out where we are," she said. Appa was instructed by Aang to land in a wide spot near a river as Sokka unfolded the map on the floor. They all got off their horses. He took in his surroundings, then looked back at the map to try to figure out where they were. When Katara discovered the river was fresh water, she filled all of their water skins. "There aren't many landmarks here that give us a clear view as to where we could be," Sokka stated. Suki pointed to a massive crack in the ground and asked, "What's over there?" Sokka leaned to look at it as they all approached. Sokka touched his finger down and raised a drop to emphasize his point. "There was a body here. Whoever it was definitely died. There's blood all over this area," he said. "Are there any tracks or anything we can follow?" "Toph, you feel anything?" asked Aang, closing his eyes and turning his head away. She stepped back a few paces, pulled out 2 metal rods that were fastened to her back, and slammed them into the floor as Toph channeled her earth, bending through the rods to see farther away. Aang felt a pulsing sensation. "I can't tell. There seems to be movement, but it's all over the place," she said, but this was cut short when a massive earthquake rocked the planet. Everyone froze, waiting for the rumbling earth to stop. Suki asked, staring at Toph, "What was that?" Toph's eyes widened. "Something hit the ground hard, like that time when that comet hit in the Fire Nation, same thing. We should follow it. We might be able to find who we're looking for," Aang advised. After running back to Appa, they all took to the skies. They set out in the direction from which the tremor had come, and soon heard the sound of metal on metal. Shouting steered them toward the east instead of their more northern course. They heard a shout, "Get away from him!" Aang saw a body slowly growing larger until it exploded as Appa flew overhead. Aang leapt out of Appa's head right away after he hit the ground. He launched a wall behind him to shield the evacuating individuals. He needed to move quickly because the flames were getting bigger and bigger. Aang swiftly split the fire in two, slicing through the conflagration and sending it safely back away from his wall. When he was done, Toph approached him and the wall collapsed. "Need a hand, Twinkle Toes," she said with a sly smile. Aang laughed. "Last I checked, you weren't a waterbender or a firebender." "Aang, we're not going to let the forest burn down, are we?" Katara said as she approached him. "Right, Katara, you take right, I got left." Katara gave him one of her bending bags as they stood in a pose as the water wall grew larger and larger, enclosing the dying flames. They moved in unison, spinning in a smooth circle across the grass. The fire was extinguished in a matter of minutes. Then Sokka and Suki approached, followed by Appa. "Ya no, I really thought we were past the showing off stage. Jumping off of Appa's head and giving us all heart attacks was like what, 5 years ago?" Sokka laughed. Aang grinned and laughed at him, saying, "Yeah, about that." "Geez, are you guys blind? There are people watching us right now," Toph said, turning to face the audience. The rest of the group turned and saw suspicion and shock on everyone's faces when Aang recalled a fact Kami had shared with him. His eyes widened in understanding. Silver, pink, and yellow hair. The description applies to 3 of the group members. Toph pushed Aang forward with her arms folded across her chest and said, "Well, are you going to break the ice before their heartbeats drive me crazy?" He said, "My name is Aang," and he said, "We're here to help you all." The group was stunned. There was silence between the 2 groups. "You guys wouldn't happen to be Leaf Ninja, would you?" Sokka responded, "Because we're supposed to meet up with Leaf Ninjas, and by the looks of your headbands that kinda looks like a leaf in a roundabout symbolic kind of way." "My name is Rock Lee, and yes, we are ninjas from the village hidden in the leaves," said the first man, a man with jet black hair and a green one-piece suit. "You are not wearing any symbol indicating where you come from, that unless that blue arrow of yours indicates your village," said another man, who was a perfect replica of the first one to speak, as he raised his hand. "Oh no, these just indicate that I'm an airbending master and that I'm also the Avatar," Aang said, glancing down at his hands and recalling the blue arrows that run the length of his body. Haggardly, the silver-headed man asked, "Avatar?" Aang, they don't know who or what an avatar is, and judging by the looks of everyone here, they are in need of some serious healing before all the questions, Katara said while holding his hand. If you would like Katara as the best healer in our world as a sign of peace, she can lend her services to you all. We promise we mean no harm, Aang said, nodding after turning to face his side. The woman with the pink hair caught the attention of all the ninjas. I agree we all need medical help, but, she began. Sakura-chan, please, said the man with the yellow hair, but two of them were holding a body between them, and there were three of them. Two of the same yellow-haired men vanished in smoke, and the group blinked twice. After nodding her head in his direction, the older woman Sakura was holding on to stood up and laid the young man with the red hair on his back. After examining his body briefly, she shook her head slowly, knowing that the young man was dead based on the shake of his head. Aang and his friends backed off a little. They were even more shocked by the subsequent confession and discussion. They were so unfamiliar with this situation that they didn't understand anything. Aang, on the other hand, knew what was going on, but he didn't want to get involved because he knew it wouldn't help anyone. There's a large amount of people heading this way, Toph said, prodding him in the side. There are a lot of people coming this way. We're going to go back to the forest and wait till Sokka and Suki, Aang said in a whisper to Katara after nodding. Katara gave a nod, and they started to cautiously return to the surrounding forest. After exchanging information, Momo was eating some berries while Appa was sprawled out on the ground, munching on some overgrown shrubs. Aang yelled, "Hey Momo, can you find more berries for us?" Momo squeaked and went into the air. When the green guy, Rock Lee, and another with long brown hair and white walked up to them, they relaxed and started to settle in. In order to speak to them, Aang got up and said, "We thought it would be better if we weren't seen by the people heading in your direction." The man in white said, his brows furrowing, "The enemy only travels in groups of two? Well, there are about 30 people headed your way, and with the situation being as it is, we figured we should disappear," Toph replied. "Will you remain here so that we may meet up with you in a couple days? You obviously know something and you know who we are," he said. Sokka said, "Can we get your name? I'm Neji Hyuga. Will you wait?" he asked, turning to face the warrior. "We will. There's a river not far from here just to the west. We will make camp there," Aang replied. Neji gave Lee a nod and motioned for him to follow. After the two ninjas had departed, the group mounted their horses and made their way back to the river. The two ninja groups showed up at their campsite 2 days later. The green man said, "Sorry for not introducing ourselves earlier. I am Might Guy," his teeth gleaming slightly. "I'm Aang the Avatar. This is my wife Katara, Sokka and his wife Suki, and my best friend Toph," Aang said, standing somewhat stunned alongside the other members of the group. The 5 visitors were scrutinized by the ninjas wearing a yellow and orange tunic that hung off one shoulder, brown trousers, and boots. Aang was clearly the leader. He had a blue arrow on his forehead, which they could see extended all the way down to his hands, and he was bald. His wife, Katara, had bright blue eyes and darker skin. She wore a simple blue dress that flowed well around her body and accentuated all of her features. Sokka was more of an intelligence and muscle guy with his dark hair pulled back into a ponytail and a long sword slung to his back. His blue tunic was sliced off at the shoulders, revealing his well-defined arms. His wife, Suki, was slender and fair, but she carried herself as though she were ready to fight at any moment. She wore a simple pale green shirt and loose brown pants, and her short light bronze hair accentuated her hazel eyes. Last but not least was Toph, who had clouded green eyes and jet black hair that reached her thighs. Her short but muscular frame made her look very elfin. She was constantly conscious of her surroundings, but she never looked directly at the person speaking. She had a beige tunic over her green shorts and shirt, and a belt fastened to her waist. 2 metal rods were strapped in an X shape on her back. "Well, since we know your names, our own introductions are in order," Guy said. "My team consists of Neji, Lee, and Tenten. Kakashi here is the leader of the second team with Naruto and Sakura." "Guy, please put me down," Kakashi said, still resting heavily on Guy's back. He leaned against a rock on the floor after Guy dropped him. Katara said softly, "You look tired. Would you like treatment?" Sakura asked, "What kind of treatment exactly?" Naruto said, "Sakura-chan, don't sound so mean," as he approached Kakashi. "It's all right. I would be suspicious as well," Katara replied. "I can either soothe strained muscles, get rid of headaches, or aid in the healing of wounds, but in this case it seems you just exhausted. Is your body tight anywhere, like it's hard for you to relax?" "Mostly around my head. My body is not responding well," Kakashi said, nodding. Katara approached him and asked, "May I?" after glancing at Sakura and him. Sakura nodded after Kakashi did. She caught a glimpse of the man named Neji doing something strange to his eyes out of the corner of her eye. "This won't hurt, I promise," she assured them. "Yeah, if anything, it'll be the best cure you can find," Sokka complained jealously. Suki pushed him. Katara put her hands on either side of his head and bent water out of her bag. All of the ninjas let out a loud gasp as the water started to glow. "Does it hurt?" Sakura inquired. "Kakashi-sensei?" Kakashi leaned his head back against the rock and closed his eyes, saying, "No, it's very soothing." With her eyes closed and kneeling in front of Kakashi, Katara questioned, "You have a lot of strained muscles around your eyes. Your optic nerves are slightly damaged. How is your eyesight?" Sakura let out a gasp. Kakashi's honest response was, "One eye is a little strained. Things get blurry from time to time." Katara replied, "I won't or rather can't treat them now because of your fatigue. This last fight has put a great strain on your body." Naruto teased the pink-haired girl, "Huh, she's even better than you, Sakura-chan," after which she knocked him flat on his back with a bloody nose. She shouted, "Baka!" at him. Toph and Suki were both laughing when she looked up to see who was laughing. Toph said, "Oh man, I like her already." Sakura grinned. While still focusing on Katara, Neji told Guy, "We need to head back to the village and give a report to the Hokage." His obsession unnerved Aang a little. "Yes, we do once Kakashi is finished getting special treatment," Guy replied. Sokka approached Neji and blocked his view, saying, "Okay, I can't take it any longer and you won't take your eyes off my sister." "What is wrong with your eyes?" Sokka asked. "Nothing is wrong with them," Neji said bluntly, sneering as his eyes narrowed at the warrior. "Well, your blood vessels are popping out and you have no pupils. That, to me, is weird," Sokka went on. Neji interrupted his Byakugan prior to responding. "I'm a Hyuga and people from my bloodline are given the power of the Byakugan. It allows me to see the chakra flow in another person's body and extends my range of vision beyond that of any normal person." Sokka shrugged and walked away from him, crossing his arms and saying, We don't have anything cool like that in our world. Aang is the only cool thing we got there." Toph snorted and said, "Sorry," to Aang, who merely grinned. "There, how's that?" Katara asked, opening her eyes and getting to her feet. "Better," Kakashi said, opening one eye, "My head doesn't ache anymore." Katara grinned and said, "Great," as Aang stood and kissed her hand. Tenten and Lee started crying. "Her cures for headaches are amazing," he said. "You guys mentioned needing to report to your Hokage. We also need to speak with him," Suki said while standing. "Tsunade Ba-chan is a woman, although sometimes she's scarier than most men," said Naruto. Sakura flexed her hand and warned, "Baka, don't speak about Tsunade-sama that way." Toph got up and cracked her knuckles, saying, "Well, there's space in the saddle if y'all want to join us on our flight there. I need some excitement. I'm tired of sitting around." Sokka flicked a tiny pebble at her back and asked, "You mean traveling here wasn't exciting enough for you?" Sokka had to duck to the side to avoid being hit when Toph blasted a wall up behind her and then sent a rock jutting from the ground. She said, "Don't start, Sokka, you'll never win," and then she collapsed her rock wall. Naruto and Lee's eyes bugged out of their heads. "How did she do that?" they asked in unison. "She's blind," Aang replied simply. Laughing, they all looked at him in confusion. "She's blind and so she has to see with her earth bending. She can sense more than just movement. She can also sense heart rate and breathing just by listening to your bodies reacting to the earth," Aang went on to say. Naruto questioned, "But how did she see that pebble in the air?" Toph put on a rather sly smile. "I felt him pick it up, not to mention I know Sokka, he likes to tick me off," he said. The group laughed. "The only one who could stand a chance against me is probably Aang. I trained him in my style of earth bending so he knows everything that I know," she said. Aang gave her a nod and said, "She's the best." Kakashi got up and pressed one hand against the rock, saying, "Okay, enough talking for now, it's time we got moving." "You should definitely ride on Appa, you're still exhausted and you don't want to get worse," Katara said. "I agree, Kakashi-sensei, it would be better and more comfortable that Guy-sensei's back," Sakura responded. "Okay, my team will go," Kakashi said with a nod. With a fist raised in the air, Naruto exclaimed, "Yatie! We get to ride on the cool animal." His attitude made the gang laugh. The group turned to face the enormous animal that was seated close to their camp. Appa got to his feet and yawned, flashing his big teeth. His deep moan caused a slight vibration in the ground beneath their feet. Aang's height just barely touched the top of Appa's enormous nose as the ninjas watched him approach the enormous beast. "This is Appa, my flying bison," Aang said affectionately. Following Aang as he approached him, Naruto questioned, "Flying bison?" When Aang patted his nose, Appa grunted in satisfaction. "Yes, He's my animal partner and guide, a dear and close friend of my heart, Aang said. Appa, this is Naruto, the bison said, turning to face the ninja with the yellow hair, who was grinning broadly. Nice to meet you, Appa, Naruto said, greeting him with a protruding hand. After staring at him, Appa suddenly took a liking to him. He yelled, "Gah!" While covered in bison spit, Naruto stood there staring at the bison while everyone laughed. Aang gave him a tender nose rub and said, "That's his way of saying he likes you, buddy. Go jump in the river and I'll dry you off when you get out." After walking to the river and plunging in, Naruto turned to face Aang. He conjured up a tiny, heated stream of air and blasted it straight at him. After drying completely, Naruto grinned and said, "That was cool." While Sakura and Kakashi waited at Appa's feet, the gang had already mounted Appa. Sakura inquired cautiously, "Do we have to go through the same meeting process as Naruto?" "No, he's friendly with just about anyone, well except those who want to hurt me or my friends. You don't want to see Appa mad," Aang informed them. Appa looked at the newcomers disinterestedly as he turned his head. "So we just jump in?" Naruto asked his teammates as he approached. Aang told him, "If you want, I can bend you up, or you can just jump in." After leaping, Naruto landed lightly in the saddle. With an obnoxious volume, Sokka inquired, "How did you do that?" Naruto replied smugly, "Ha ha, you guys aren't the only ones who are special," and then he took a seat. Sakura appeared anxious as Aang glanced at her and Kakashi. His smile was directed at the girl with the pink hair. "Don't worry, Appa has never lost or dropped anyone who was ever on his back. Toph even rode bareback and he didn't let her fall," he said. She cracked a grin. "Thanks for the reassurance, Kakashi-sensei. Would you like help up?" She leapt to carry them both after he nodded. "You all are welcome to join us," Aang said, turning to face the others. "He won't be able to fly for long, but it's a break from walking." Tenten said, "Guy-sensei?" After the four of them exchanged glances. "You can do anything you want to do," he said with his trademark grin. "Neji, Lee, are you coming?" she asked excitedly, smiling before jumping into the saddle. "I think this would be a glorious new experience to fly without having to use chakra to bounce off trees and such. Guy-sensei, with your permission." Lee raised his hand. "I agree, this would be a completely new experience. Neji, let us join the others," Guy said with a smile to his favorite student. Neji moaned that he didn't like the idea, but since he was outvoted and a little exhausted, he complied. Tenten sat down beside her, and his eyes glowed. Suki and Katara noticed and exchanged a slight smile. Toph's heartbeat changed. "What?" she inquired. "Nothing," they all agreed. Toph connected her own arm through one of the saddle's armholes and advised everyone who had never done this before to hold onto it until they were accustomed to it. "Okay, first-time flyers, no jumping in the saddle and please refraining from screaming too loud, and if you have to use the restroom let us know since we are cramped into a smaller place than normal," she said, and the ninjas heeded her advice as Aang stood on the edge of the saddle. Aang grabbed his staff from Momo's tail and said, "And don't bend over too far because then I will have to jump off his head to save you, and Katara hates it when I do that." Momo had just landed on Aang's shoulder. "Oh, and this is Momo, my flying lemur bat." Katara giggled when he said, "I only don't like it when you're jumping in to stop an explosion or ride giant water snakes without anyone's knowledge to your plans." "Grab hold, everybody. Appa yip yip," said Aang, grinning before turning and sitting on Appa's head. The additional weight gave Appa a running start, causing his tail to waggle up and down. He launched himself into the air and climbed higher and higher for another second before leveling out and establishing a steady pace. Sakura was sitting comfortably in the saddle, but she clung to the side as though she were about to fall. Toph questioned, "Isn't the first time terrifying?" When Katara realized who she was talking to, she turned to face Toph. She said, "She talking to you, Sakura," attracting the girl's interest. Starting with, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize, Sakura." "Don't apologize, I'm still getting used to your body. Give me a couple days and I'll be able to point you out in a room full of people," Toph said with a smile. Kakashi questioned, "When you say get used to their bodies, what do you mean?" When she said, "Well, take Twinkle's toes over there," Aang interrupted. Angrily, he said, "I thought we were dropping the nicknames? I'm proving a point. Take Aang for example. I call him Twinkle's toes because every time he walks I can barely feel him, but I know he's there. Being an airbender is probably the main reason Katara likes to shuffle her feet. Suki mostly walks on her toes unless she's extremely tired, and Sokka always walks like he's the most important person on the planet." Sokka grumbled, "You couldn't come up with a better explanation than that?" "Nope, snoozles, get over it," she replied, gesturing to him. Neji gave a little laugh at this. She shifted her head in the other direction and asked, "What's so funny?" You would be a very good sensor-type chakra reader even though you're describing physical properties, and with Aang's explanation of your ability earlier you should be able to sense more than that, Neji said. Nodded Kakashi. Have you ever been able to feel your opponent's power that's inside of them? Toph paused for a moment. I don't think so. I've fought many opponents and each time I was only able to really judge their strength. While we were fighting I've always won. With his fist over his heart, Lee questioned, I think it would be a great test of strength and youth if I could be so bold as to request a challenge of the mighty Toph. You don't even know what kind of power she has yet, Tenten warned Lee. It's the same as every situation, Tenten, Guy replied. You go on a mission to battle foes you may or may not know. But I think it would only be fair if I were to spar with her first, since we would want to end up hurting anyone, Aang said, emerging from Appa's mind. Katara went on to say, I agree, our styles are probably very different. Neji looked at her and said, you were using chakra weren't you when I was watching you earlier? A little perplexed, Katara said, I'm not sure, we don't have anything like chakra in our world. You guys keep saying our world and your world? Aren't you from around here at all? Where did you come from? Naruto interrupted her abruptly. About time your curiosity got the better of you, Sakura whispered. Suki said, you guys don't know. With a hint of frustration, Naruto questioned, know what? We were asked to come here, Aang responded, by Kami, one of your deities. There were shocked looks everywhere. Kakashi inquired curiously, you all can speak to spirits in the heavens? Katara replied, Aang's avatar powers allow him to do that, not us. With curiosity, Tenten inquired, what's an avatar? An avatar is the most powerful being in our world. He can bend and control all four elements. Air, water, earth, and fire. There's also a special state that he can enter that allows him to access generations of avatars' knowledge and power. Basically all his past lives can come together and grant him power beyond recognition, Katara said. Not to mention I've also added metal bending and lightning to my many abilities as well, Aang said. And also energy. Sokka was interrupted when Toph's hand shot to his mouth. Firmly, we don't need to talk about that, she said. The exchange caused the ninjas to narrow their eyes. He turned around and sat back down on Appa's head. We don't need to talk about that right now, Aang explained. It will come up eventually. Sakura was intrigued but was willing to let the topic fall. This is obviously a sensitive subject, but can I ask why? She asked. When nobody responded, they all turned to face Katara, who was looking at Aang. He doesn't like talking about it, that's all. It's hard for him sometimes and I know he doesn't want to scare you. Sakura gave Naruto a slap across the head after he asked, but what is it? Baka, he doesn't want to talk about it, she reprimanded. Aang said, no, you should know, as he slowly climbed into the saddle. Katara extended her hand to him and said, it can wait. Aang grinned at Naruto and said, if Naruto is anything like Sokka, I would think he would try to beat it out of me before we reached the village. Naruto nodded, but as he observed Aang's behavior, compassion grew in his eyes. Aang sat down beside Katara. This is something I was hoping to keep a secret from most ears, but since it's been brought up I need all of you to please promise me that you will never tell another soul about this power, that is if they don't already know about it. It's dangerous and complicated and is my last resort because of the risks that it involves. Aang looked at all of the riders. Kakashi glanced at his pupil nonchalantly and said, you have our word as ninjas from Hidden Leaf that this secret will be kept, Naruto. This means you can't blabber this around to everyone you see. In response, he said, I know Kakashi-sensei, with a hint of irritation. Aang breathed deeply prior to speaking. This power is one that only I can use. I've been the only one given this power since before the age of the Avatar, and it's been thousands of years since the Avatar has ruled in our world. This power is called energy bending. Energy bending is the ability to change a person's physical energy inside their body. What this means in our world is that the person loses their bending ability and it leaves him or her physically exhausted for the next few weeks until their body can adjust to the change. While Neji, Guy, and Kakashi maintained their composure, Sakura, Naruto, Tenten, and Lee all had wide eyes. Toph said, he's not going to use it on any of you guys. Sheesh, relax, to the shocked passengers. Kakashi remarked, there are obviously side effects. Guy said, yes, you mentioned something about risks, and he did. Aang exhaled. The user of this power must know beyond any shadow of a doubt that this person deserves their bending to be taken away. If he or she doesn't stand firm, then the user is the one to become corrupted and loses himself. Katara tightened her hold on his hand, and no one failed to notice. Aang, it's okay, Katara said, using her free hand to rub his neck. Another effect of succeeding is the fact that the user looks into the person's very soul. They see the world through his eyes and feel what he feels. Even after going through all of that, you have to remain firm in your belief that this person is corrupted. His tone became raspy. The dreams and memories also stay with you the rest of your life, he concluded in a whisper. Yo Aang, Sokka said lovingly, you did the right thing. It was a long time ago, okay. Suki smiled and said, relax, your record is still perfect. The ninjas thought about what Aang had just said. How many times have you used this power? Guy responded. Twice, Aang replied. Once because it was the only way for me to defeat a tyrant, and the second time by choice because I was asked to in order to spare someone's life. Toph said quietly, it shouldn't have been spared anyway, she didn't deserve it, but Aang could hear him. When he said, it's not my decision who lives and dies, I'm not the judge, his voice was a little strained and hard. Whoa, I was just expressing my own personal feelings, Toph said in defense. Katara patched up the quickly widening gap by saying, she didn't mean it like that Aang, it was Zuko's decision anyway, and it's what he wanted as a friend. You gave him a gift. Tenten said, you have never killed anyone? And Aang held his head in his hands. Aang gave a no shake. She persisted in asking, ever, like, not one person by accident. Accidents happen, but I've never once killed out of malicious hatred or even in defense, and especially not in the Avatar state, Aang said with a smile. Sokka grinned at his sister and said, yeah, Katara is the lucky charm for Aang in that area. If it weren't for her, we should just avoid going there. This power, the Avatar state, has anyone tried taking it away from you? Neji inquired thoughtfully. That's not possible. If I die, the Avatar will be reborn into the next nation in the cycle. In this case it's water, and if I die while in the Avatar state, then the cycle is broken and the Avatar would cease to exist, replied Aang. The group did not overlook the fact that every ninja glanced at Naruto. On a whim, Kakashi remarked, I think that you and Naruto will find you have many things in common. As the sun sank quickly in the west, Aang saw that Appa had significantly lost height. Appa's getting tired, we should make camp, Aang said as he climbed back up on Appa's head. Guy stated, right, Neji, find us a good location, while peering over the edge of the saddle. Byakugan, Neji said, looking around the area, there's a nice meadow by a river about 2 miles east. As the company dismounted, Aang pointed Appa in the direction Neji had indicated. Well, we made good time. My guess is we will be back at Konoha by tomorrow afternoon, said Kakashi. We're already within Fire Nation borders, so trap setting won't be necessary. Guy grinned, giving a thumbs up. I agree, rival, it's time to get some sleep before we set out in the morning, he said. Aang woke up earlier than the others the following morning. The discussion of energy bending had triggered memories he had been trying to repress for years, which was why he had been a little restless the entire night. He left his shoes and shirt behind and walked to the nearby river normally. He would even take off his pants so that he was only wearing his underwear, but since there were other people besides their close-knit group, he decided against it as he soaked in the cool water. The sun was just peeking over the horizon, tinting the sky a stunning shade of purple with hints of orange. That scar on your back looks painful, Kakashi said as Aang turned to face him. As he emerged from the river, Aang quickly dried himself with airbending and said, oh yeah, I got shot by lightning during our war, that shot killed me. Curious, he said, you died? Then shouldn't you still be dead? Aang grinned. I have Katara and the Avatar spirits to thank for that. Through both of them I was able to save my own life as well as the life of the Avatar. I ended up in a coma for about a month though. He sat on a nearby rock and said, this war you just mentioned, when did it end? 6 years ago, was Aang's redressing response. How old are you now? Asked Kakashi, his eyes widening. I'm 18, said Aang, grinning at the direction these inquiries were taking. Kakashi questioned incredulously, then you were 12 when you fought this war? Aang grinned and said, the youngest Avatar to master all 4 elements. How long did this war last for? 100 years, it's known in our land as the 100-Year War, he replied, laughing silently. Kakashi was perplexed once more but remained silent. Don't worry, when we meet with your Hokage my entire past will be explained. I would like it if you were present since you were one of the people Kami told me to find. He chuckled. You commune with spirits, control a series of elements like it's natural for you. You were 12 when you fought in a war that you ended after it lasted for 100 years. What are you doing here? Why would some of our divine beings want you here unless they know something that we don't? He concluded with a whisper. Aang said, may I ask you a personal question? He shrugged and said, I think I've done that to you, so ask away. Without glancing at him, Aang questioned, do you have any special abilities like time-space traveling? Kakashi glanced over at him. I've just awakened my Magankyo Sharingan, and yes, had you not stepped in and taken care of the explosion, I would have blown it into another dimension. Aang grinned. You were the one Kami was talking about. She told me the one who would assist us in sending us back to our own world was a powerful man, not easily killed. It would make sense that she would tell me to look for a man with silver hair and to count him as my ally. After giving his words some thought, Kakashi said, That's a lot of pressure you just put on my shoulders, but I will try my best not to die. Aang laughed. Trust me. I want to return to my son. I won't let anything happen to you if I can help it. I don't think I've ever had a bodyguard before, said Kakashi with a smile. Aang remarked nonchalantly, It seems like more people are awake, without looking back. Everyone except Naruto and Sokka are currently awake, Kakashi said as he turned. Aang got up and stretched, saying, Sokka would be the last one to wake up. Kakashi turned to face him and said, Same with Naruto. Oh, and one more thing. You can trust Naruto and Sakura. I would try to find some time to speak with him if you can. I think you'll find more in common with him than you realize. Kakashi then turned to return to the camp. No, not yet. The sun isn't up yet. Aang joined the others as Suki was rousing Sokka. Immediately after saying, Give me a break, Sokka, she picked him up in his sleeping bag and carried him to the river. As soon as he saw where she was heading, Sokka leapt from his bag. He yelled, I'm up! I'm up! At her as Katara and Aang rolled up their bags. She muttered, After all these years you still whine about getting up in the morning. Aang gave her a head kiss and said, Some things will never change. They only had rice cakes and other non-perishables for breakfast. Sokka bought some jerky and gave some to the group. He and Aang found some wild berries when Momo went scavenging. Naruto yelled, Oi Aang, to get his attention, want a rice ball? He approached him and inquired, Is there any meat in it? No, but it's delicious, Naruto said, tilting his head to the side. After accepting the rice ball and grinning, Aang said, Thank you, adding, You were right, it is delicious. Lee asked, Do you not eat meat, Avatar? Call me Aang, and I don't eat meat, he replied with a smile. What about ramen? Inquired Naruto. Ramen? He asked, looking perplexed. With a broad smile, Naruto said, I'm taking you to eat the best ramen in all of the Hidden Leaf, Ichiraku's ramen. All of the ninjas laughed at him. Naruto is a ramen addict, Sakura said. It's a noodle and soup dish, and I have to admit, we do have the best ramen chef in Konoha. Time to move out, declared Kakashi as Aang gave Appa a quick pat on the nose. Everyone mounted him. Just a little farther, all right buddy. With a groan, Appa shook his head eagerly. Sorry, I guess old habits die hard, don't they? Laughed Aang. Momo appeared out of nowhere, squawking and flying straight at Aang, and Appa grunted once more as they watched a conversation between the two. The entire group got to their feet. It seems there's a bit of a problem in one of the towns not too far from here, Aang informed the others as he got into the horse. In my world it's my responsibility to look into disruptions, but since we're not in my world I'll leave the decision up to you. Guy looked at Kakashi and said, Does he know exactly where? The lemur squawked and took off in a northeastern direction when Aang asked, Where at Momo? Aang said, That direction. To them Tenten said, Well, we are in our homeland, can't hurt, right? But let others make the final choice. I agree, and it may be nothing and we would be heading in the general direction for home anyway. Lee's expression lit up. Neji protested, We do have important information to relay. But we also have a quicker mode of transportation and we're already ahead of schedule, Sakura stated. Naruto looked expectantly at Aang and exclaimed, Then it's settled, let's go, the words said. Aang simply grinned while awaiting the older men's ultimate judgment. Naruto's smile turned sly as he said, Besides, if there is trouble, I want to see what our new friends can do. Sakura muttered, Baka, but she agreed with her teammate, who smiled at him and gave him a gentle shoulder rub. Well Guy, seems we're outvoted, sorry Neji, but we will see what's happening, Kakashi said. After Aang nodded, Appa left in Momo's wake about a mile outside of town. Aang landed Appa as smoke rose above the trees. Everyone got off their horses. This will be first and foremost a leaf matter. I would like to advise you to stay in the background until we know exactly what's happening, Guy told the others. Aang said, We understand, and they started to walk up the main road. Guy said, Neji, what's happening inside? It seems to be the work of low-level ninjas, and they are pillaging the town. So far no casualties. I count 10 thieves total, Neji said, turning on his Byakugan and gazing intently at the village. With the words, Nah, easy enough, let's get right to it, Naruto started to move forward but Sakura stopped him. She reprimanded, You're not Team Kapitan, Kakashi? Guy asked, surveying the town. With his hands in his pockets, Kakashi said, normally, this would be considered a B-ranked mission since they are ninjas in terms of payment they can probably only afford C rank. With narrowed eyes, Sokka questioned, you guys get paid for helping people? Yes, it's how we earn our living. Being a ninja in our world is our job. We take missions and if we return alive we get paid differently. Ranked missions means a difference in payments. B ranked is higher than C, meaning there's more money involved and also greater risk for B ranks, explained Kakashi. Sakura grinned and continued, and normally we only go out on mission that has been commissioned, except for emergency situations like the ones you guys stumbled upon with us. Aang started to feel uncomfortable echoing his sentiments. Katara said, it almost seems wrong to charge people for helping them. Kakashi shrugged his shoulders. How else would you have us live? It's our way of life, he said. If it's an issue of money then my group and I can take care of it. We're not ninjas so we won't have to charge them, Aang said. But then you would be cheating us out of a day's work, Guy replied. Anyway, you wouldn't be fighting anyway, Katara claimed to Aang. Are you serious? Aang asked, looking shocked. Yes, don't think for a minute I'm gonna have you putting your life on the line over petty thieves in a strange world. You are too important. We can handle it, Katara insisted. Aang gave her a sly smile and said, I'm not weak, Katara. Katara, you're taking out a major player. What if these guys can bend things we can't? Sokka said. Sokka, I'm not losing him, she said, fixing him with her stern gaze. I'm going to have to fight sometime, Katara. You never stopped me before, why now? Aang responded. He could see Katara trying to contain her tears as she turned back to face him and said, we're not discussing this now. As he pulled her into an embrace, Aang's face softened. You heard me talking this morning, didn't you? He asked. She tensed, revealing herself. He muttered his passionate pledge, I assure you, Katara, that it won't happen again. They were surrounded by awkward onlookers, all except Naruto. He whispered, what are you two talking about? These things will be explained once we meet with your Hokage, Sokka replied. Toph turned to face her and seized her arm, pulling her away from Aang. Katara, he said, we need to talk. I don't want to. Katara knew she would lose, so she didn't even try to fight. That scar, same thing you told me before? Kakashi asked, turning to face Aang. Aang replied, ever since, but more so now that we're married and have a child. Naruto glared at Kakashi as he nodded, asking, when did he tell you and not us? Kakashi responded, I asked him this morning, but his answers were very confusing, so it's best to just wait, as Katara and Toph made their way back. Katara folded her arms and said, you hear me, Aang, one of us is with you at all times. Yes my dear, he said, drawing her hands away from him and planting a kiss on them. Katara, just so this is out in the open, you are one lucky gal I think most girls would kill to get a guy such as yours, Tenten said with a grin. Sakura also grinned as Naruto scowled at her. Smile girlfriend, because both of us are jealous, Sakura said. Katara smiled appreciatively at the two women and raised her head, saying, thank you. Then Sokka interrupted, alright, are we saving people or not? With ferocious eyes, Lee concurred, I agree with Sokka, we should rid the village of the enemy. Kakashi, they may have already sent a civilian to the Leaf about this. We can send a notice to Tsunade saying what we're doing so they don't send others, Guy said, laughing at his apprentice's antics. Kakashi said, I think you're right, and then he put his hand on the ground to call forth a little dog. The dog said, yo, and the group all froze, their eyes wide. Kakashi fastened a little scroll around Pakun's neck and said, hey Pakun, I need you to deliver a message to Tsunade as fast as you can. Right, he said before soaring off at breakneck speed. Sokka looked at everyone and said, that dog, it spoke right, I'm not the only one that saw that right. If only you could see your faces, chuckled Naruto. Toph joined in his laughter, saying, yeah, if only I could. People laughed even harder at that comment. Shortly after, two kids ran up the path where the ninjas had been stopped, not realizing them until the last second. The girls screamed, taking hold of the young boy's hand. She drew him behind her. When she saw their headbands, her eyes widened. You're ninjas from Konoha, right? She asked, a little cautiously. Guy said, we are young lady, and who might you be? My name is Sumi and this is my little brother Taki, she told the frightened kid. We just escaped from the town to head towards our village. Will you please help us, my mom and dad? They. Don't cry, Aang said tenderly as he knelt down in front of the girl, wiping away her tears. You saved your little brother, and now you must be strong for him. I will help you, that's my promise as the Avatar. Katara grinned at the gentle conversation and gave Sokka and Suki a meaningful look. After grinning, Naruto joined Aang, saying, "You have my word, brave girl, that your village will be free from these men who have harmed your family." Kakashi and Sakura both sighed. Kakashi pondered, "Well, it appears Naruto sealed our fate." Looking up at the rising smoke, Aang said, "I know the men who did this won't answer to us. It's obvious since we're not wearing your headbands." "We should try still, Aang. You won't be happy if we don't," Sokka said. Aang turned to face his friends and nodded, saying, "Let's go. The more time we waste, the more people will die. We're here to stop that and aid those who also wish to stop it." After releasing his arm from around Suki, Sokka pulled out his sword and swung it over his head. Suki took out her fans and flipped them around in her palms. Toph pulled out both of her metal rods and struck the ground with them, causing them to form two swords. She laughed, "It's been a while since I've been in a good scuffle. The earth rumbles back at home are getting dreadfully easy. You were not commissioned to assist this city in order to preserve your ideals. We will assist," said Aang, laughing before turning to face the ninjas. "Well," Kakashi said as he looked at Guy, "they are in a foreign land and we do not know the opponent's abilities. Seems we would receive more of a beating from the Hokage if we didn't assist than if we were late." Sakura shivered. "I agree, Kakashi-sensei, we don't want Tsunade-sama mad," she said. "Then it's decided. We will create a perimeter in order to catch any bandits that would be trying to escape the city. The Avatar and his friends will deal with things happening inside. If everything goes smoothly, then this should all be over within an hour," Guy predicted. Nodded Kakashi. "Naruto, I want shadow clones on the wall of the city. Do not attack unless you." "Aang's protection is top priority," Katara interrupted. Replied, "Naruto, your clones will guard Aang's blind spot wherever he is in the city. The rest of us will provide backup if they try to escape, just like Guy suggested. Let's get this done quickly. We have important information to get to the Hokage." Sakura, "Find the children a safe place to hide, then watch the front gate. Everyone else, let's move out." "Where are the main forces?" Aang asked, glancing at Toph. "You know you can do this too." Toph sighed. He smiled and said, "There are 3 waiting for us by the main gate. Where are the others?" Neji was about to report after activating his Byakugan when Tenten stopped him and instructed him to observe. Aang could feel it. "You said you guys wanted to gauge our abilities." Toph is correct that I share the same abilities as her, but her metal rods allow her greater sight at longer distances. "Nobody move or you'll throw me off." Toph strode forward, causing the area around them to tremble as she drove the 2 rods into the ground. She pulsed the ground once more after a few seconds and got to her feet. She paused as she heard the children's heartbeats quicken, then said, "I shouldn't say any more. Like you said. 3 at the gate, 2 on the right, and 1 on the left. The rest are in the main plaza and they have the men line up against the wall." Aang replied, "Sokka, you and Suki take care of the main gate. The rest of us will drop in on Appa. Let's hurry before anyone loses their lives. Be careful. All jutsu is preceded by hand signs, so you will have a few moments to prepare even if you don't know what's going to happen," Sakura said as the ninjas, with the exception of Sakura, took off after they all nodded. "Thanks for the tip," Sokka replied. "We'll just have to be faster. Remember, we're taking them prisoner. No casualties if we can help it," reminded Aang. "We know, Aang, so let's go." Sokka sighed. Sokka and Suki started running as the benders boarded Appa until he knew they were within sight of the front gate. Appa hovered high above them. The sight of the front gate caused Sokka and Suki to slow down as Toph had instructed. They had no trouble identifying the 3 guards on the wall, 2 on the right and 1 on the left. As one of the men yelled, "The village is closed." Suki called out as she continued to move forward, "We see smoke. Are you guys in need of assistance?" Another guard yelled, "No, leave at once." Stretching his hands above his head, Sokka called out, "Are you sure? Because you guys look a little worn out to me." One of the men jumped down, wearing a 3-pronged symbol on his forehead that reminded him of crude drawings of mountains. "Beat it or we'll use force," he said. However, the long, straight line that was struck directly down the middle was what truly drew Sokka's attention. With his hands behind his head, he said, "Well, we hurried without reason, so could you guys at least give us something to drink?" He received a grunt from the guard, who said, "Final warning, leave or you and your pretty little girl will be dead." Suki grinned and said, "I'm sure." Then she struck out with such lightning speed that she knocked the man to the ground. His 2 friends responded immediately before spears of rock leapt out of the ground. Another leapt down, creating a series of hand signals. Toph had trained Sokka and Suki to jump over them with ease. Sokka shouted at Suki, "I've got him, you go after the 3rd. As she scaled the wall, she exclaimed, "Got it." 2 knives were thrown at her head, but she deflected them once she reached the top. When she launched her attack, she discovered that she was up against yet another earthbender. She grinned at her good fortune, assuming that since she could sense the attack coming, Avoiding it would be simple. She didn't anticipate getting a lucky hit on the guy, but it ended up being a rock before more knives were aimed directly at her head. She stood there dumbfounded. The next thing she knew, a child with blonde hair leapt in front of her, took a hit, and vanished in a cloud of smoke. She witnessed two more blondes capturing her opponent. After the smoke had cleared, she noticed three more of the same child tying up the wall guards. When she looked over the wall again, Sokka called from inside the gates, "Are we going to join the others or are you going to stand there all day?" Rolling her eyes, Suki said, "I'm coming." Before they ran through the town, she was given a quick, passionate kiss after jumping down. He had to acknowledge that Naruto's clones, who were observing the action, were quite good. He had no idea that fans could be so strong and resilient in combat. They were able to predict the attacks each time they occurred. Even when they were directed at two respectable Earth users, he knew he might have to intervene. When he witnessed Suki freeze in shock, she was unaware that two kunai knives were being hurled at her until his clone leapt in front of her and took the blow. He intervened and helped them both put an end to their arguments after another clone vanished because he knew the other would require their help. "They'll need you over in the main area," he said to Sokka. After calling to his partner and nodding, Sokka and his partner started running. After leaving Sokka and Suki to fight it out, Aang led Appa forward. Toph led them to the main area, which he circled. The main villagers were cowering in fear behind the 5 men who were lined up against the wall guards. His expression darkened as he was immediately reminded of some of the destroyed Earth Kingdom towns during the conflict. "I want to make an entrance," he said, calling Katara and Toph back. "Good," Toph said, clutching the saddle's sides. "I think an entrance is necessary and wicked fun." With a nod, Katara said, "Let's do it." "Alright, I'm going to have Appa fly a little low, drawing their attention. Then we're going to jump off and knock out the 2 guards by the prisoners on the wall. Then we're going to talk to the leader." Aang gave them the strategy. "And what if the leader doesn't like what we have to say?" Katara inquired. "Then we defend the villagers and take the men hostage." Toph uttered the anxious words, "Let's do this." "Alright buddy, take us down low over their heads then fly out of range," says Aang, nodding. Appa grunts back. "Now," Aang shouted after them. A second later, the crowd below them gasped when they saw Appa, and they all jumped. Aang quickly blew away the kunai knives that some of the men threw at him with a wave of his staff. As soon as they touched down, Katara hurled water around each guard and tossed them to the ground by Toph. In response, she covered their entire body, aside from their heads, with earth and bound them. As the other members of the gang prepared to attack, Aang interrupted, saying, "I need to speak with the leader of your group." "Why?" said the men, laughing, "we have no business with you." Standing tall, Aang said, "I have business with you. This town is not yours for the taking. I wish to speak to the man in charge." Repeatedly in front of him to emphasize it, he pounded it against the floor. A man with a cigarette in his mouth said, "I'm the leader," as he emerged from the main building steps. "Why this town? What purpose does this serve, invading and stealing these people's livelihoods and homes?" asked Aang as he took a few steps forward. The man chuckled, "Power. Do I need another reason? Besides, you look too young to even understand." "I may look young, but I've seen my fair share of hatred and violence. I'm going to ask you to leave peacefully before my friends and I take drastic actions," warned him, his eyes narrowing. The leader sneered, "You say that there are drastic actions, and I'd love to see that." Aang, hammering his staff against the ground once more, said, "I don't want to take that route, please leave quietly." The man was now staring suspiciously at him. "No. And that's my final answer. This village belongs to me and my men. These people weren't powerful enough to protect it themselves. Anyone weak enough like that needs someone like me to rule over them. Now I'm going to kill you, then take both of your women for myself. I think they will please me greatly," he said with a wink. "You will not speak about my wife in that fashion," Aang said angrily. "Then would you like a play-by-play of what I'm going to do with your wife?" the leader asked, laughing along with his men once more. The stream of water was coming directly at his head, but he didn't see it. One of his men built an earth wall to block it. "I think not," Katara said with a sneer. "Well, if it's a fight you want, then I challenge anyone who can use earth to a battle. If you can beat me, then you can have me," Toph said as she flipped her hair. "Deal," said the leader without hesitation. "I'm not finished. If you lose, we get to take you all prisoner," she said. The leader screamed at his men, "Let's start then, get those people out of the way." Katara approached the men on the wall and helped them get to safety. Aang watched her closely. "So who's first?" Toph asked as she strode forward, swinging her 2 metal rods around herself. "I am." A big, smirking man exclaimed. A circle was formed by the Rouge ninjas. When her opponent yelled, "The first one to give loses," she taunted him by pushing 1 rod into the ground and sealing it there, saying, "I'll have you begging for mercy before I even break a sweat." He began to circle her, and she remained motionless as she heard his movements over the jeering crowd. She raised her other rod and blocked the 3 shrunken that the giant threw at her. She asked, "Really, that's all you got?" "Oh, I'm just getting warmed up," he said with ease, grinning at her. The ground started to tremble as Toph felt his upper body shift. Rock spears? She asked herself. He planned to swiftly impale her, but she defended herself by building a rock pyramid as they shot up toward her. She shot one of the walls through the spears as soon as she felt him stop, and then she shot the second half of the wall directly behind the first in the dust cloud from the first attack. The first attack was stopped by the giant, but the second was not foreseen. Toph jumped up and ran through the path she made. As soon as it hit him, the giant leapt to his feet and threw 2 kunai at her, which she deflected once more, but not before he scratched her shoulder. He taunted, "Oh, did I hurt you?" "No, you just pissed me off," snarled Toph. The giant was knocked off balance as the whole ground shook. The man was pierced in the arms and legs by 4 spears that sprang up from the ground before she hurled the spears higher. He let out a loud cry, which caused the man's body to fall a little more because of gravity. She yelled at him, "Doesn't feel nice, does it? Who's next, or are the rest of you too chicken?" The leader commanded, "I think we're done playing games. Everyone, take them out." Their leader was left undefended as the final 3 thugs charged forward. Since none of the men were walking on earth, it was more difficult for Toph to detect them, so Aang and Katara leapt forward. The men fell back to the ground after Aang threw 2 fireballs from his hands. Grinning, Toph launched an assault on one of them. The other 2 sprinted in the direction of Katara and Aang. Aang chose to fight him because one of them also used fire style, while Katara faced a quicker, smaller opponent. One thing that caught her off guard was how fast this guy could move. Every time she believed she had him, he vanished. She was starting to lose patience when she recalled some of the post-war training she had received with Aang. Airbenders were never very good fighters, but we were frequently praised for our speed when we sparred with others. Therefore, the trick would be to avoid looking after us. She refocused, standing with her arms drenched in water in a single direction. Her opponent stood directly in front of her. Grinning, she returned his smile before crouching in preparation for his assault. He leapt forward, making hand signals as he charged straight at her. She quickly extended her hands to try to grab him, but he vanished, and she could feel him behind her. She waited for him to attack once more, and when he did, she turned and stopped him in his tracks. When the fire user saw how easily Aang deflected his attacks, he was shocked. Aang grinned as he recalled how frustrating it had been for him to train with Zuko. Following the war, Zuko created enormous waves of fire without the comet's assistance, hoping that Aang would deflect them. He hoped this opponent felt the same way. The man's greatest error occurred in another instant when he leapt into the air. Hoping to surprise him, Aang only needed to generate a tiny air current to spin him around a few times and send him hurtling to the ground. When he was done, Aang turned to see that Toph and Katara had both finished. He looked again, wide-eyed, seeing Suki and Sokka standing close to the unconscious leader on the ground. "I really wanted to beat him," sighed Aang. Katara chuckled, "to think he'd be taken down as easily as a blow to the head." A few seconds later, the ninjas joined them with a fist-pumping. Naruto exclaimed, "That was awesome." With a sly smile, Toph folded her arms and said, "I'm glad you enjoyed it." When Suki showed her, Tenten asked, "Can I see your fans?" "It's amazing what you guys can do without having to form chakra," said Kakashi, who was reading a book as he approached. "An interesting performance, to say the least." "Well," said Aang with a shrug, "it's just a part of who we are." That's when Appa landed. Guy said, "Time to go," as he and his team rounded up all the Rouges. Grass country. Genins, by the looks of it, could possibly be Chunin but never took the exam. "Oh, definitely Chunin. Probably went Rouge before actually going through the exam," Kakashi said. "How far are we from the village hidden in leaves?" Aang inquired. "Oh, about 4 hours," was Kakashi's response. Then, Aang informed him, "Appa should be able to fly us all there." "Very well, let's tie them up. Naruto, go get Sakura so she can sedate these men," Kakashi said. "So what kind of chakra do they have?" asked Kakashi as he walked up to Neji. "It's hard to explain," he responded. "It's there but different. We actually have to mix out internal energies together in order to perform a jutsu, but they just do it like it's a part of their body." That woman, Katara. Did you see what she did to that man?" Neji said, pointing to the frozen one. "I've never seen ice style before. I have Naruto fought a boy named Haku who possessed the Kekkei Genkai for ice." "I don't get it," Neji said, his eyes narrowing. Kakashi responded, "I think many things will make sense when we reach Konoha," as he approached the bison. As Guy and Lee spoke to the appreciative villagers, Naruto held all the prisoners together as Appa flew with the prisoners beneath him. They all waved goodbye. Kakashi told Aang to land outside the village as the gates of Konoha came into view. I think their appearance should be shrouded until the Hokage can make a decision about them, Guy said. Kakashi replied, true, but we have unexpected prisoners that need to be taken care of. Guy replied, we will take them to the intelligence division while you take our guests to the Hokage. After they split up into groups, Neji went up to Kakashi and said, please, I would like to be present for their explanation. I'll tell Tsunade. I think the rest of your team is equally curious, Kakashi laughed. To avoid drawing unwanted attention, Appa flew over the town higher than was necessary. Naruto told the Hokage to land just inside the gate after pointing out his tower when they were spotted. A number of the village's ninjas quickly rushed to the area defining the top of the wall. They only watched as Kakashi waved them away after instantly recognizing his team in single file. They slid off the enormous bison and entered the Hokage's tower. Appa immediately sat down on the ground while Momo chattered on his head. Around her tower, Tsunade sensed an uneasy presence of shinobi glancing out one of her large windows that overlooked the village. She got up from her chair in front of her tower. She saw a big summons animal lying down with a wooden device and an arrow before it vanished. She could make out Sakura's pink hair, and she pondered what was happening. She shouted, Shizune. A few seconds later, she walked in and said, yes, Tsunade-sama. Come in. She commanded louder than necessary as a tiny knock interrupted her. Team Kakashi is back and I want a full report from them immediately, she said. Sakura entered last, followed by Kakashi, Naruto, and 5 strangers she had never seen. Tsunade Shisho bowed Sakura. It was Naruto who said, Oi, Tsunade Ba-chan, we brought you a surprise. With narrowed eyes, Tsunade said, I can see that Naruto. First things first, report on the cage. Kakashi reported the incident. Omitting some details he knew she would question him about in private later, he gave a brief account of the encounter with the Aang and his companions as well as the small town's rescue. Sakura moved her feet, and Tsunade's eyes narrowed. You should have come home directly, especially since you brought some visitors with you, she said. Aang said, it's my fault, so they wouldn't have to bear the consequences of his choice. Tsunade ran a hand over him. Bald with a blue arrow tattoo along his head and orange and yellow dressed hands, this older boy, who was about 18 or 20, was 6 feet tall and of a respectable build. He carried a big staff or walking stick and was clearly the group leader because he came in first and the others seemed to respect him. Your name? She inquired, reclining in her seat. My name is Aang. We were sent here by Kami to assist you in your world in the upcoming war, he said with honesty. His declaration, who sent you here? Surprised Tsunade. He responded once more, Kami, I think she is one of your deities in this world. As Shizune turned to face her master, Tsunade said softly, grab me that scroll. After leaving the room, Shizune came back a short while later. She handed the scroll to Tsunade, who opened it. Naruto whimpered, Ba-chan, won't you ask? She railed, silence Naruto, closing her eyes and putting the scroll down. Who else know of them? She asked Kakashi. My team and guys, they wish to be present for their explanation that Aang has agreed to give. Tsunade murmured, Shizune, tell Team Guy to come here at once and also Inoichi Yamanaka, Shikaku and Shikamaru Nara. She said, yes Tsunade-sama, and walked out. Tsunade inquired, who are the rest of your friends? This is my wife Katara, her brother Sokka and wife Suki, and this is Toph, Aang replied. Tsunade examined each of them. Suki and Sokka appeared to be experienced fighters, and the man was around 6 feet 2 inches with his wife around 5 feet 9 inches, even though Toph was only slightly taller than 5 feet 3 inches by her reckoning. She exuded a sense of dominance that rivaled Kiba's, and Katara, standing comfortably by her husband's side up to his shoulder, had a very calm and maternal appearance about her. Team Guy came in after hearing another knock on the door. Report, Tsunade said, turning to face Guy, who provided a succinct report that was comparable to Kakashi's. So you were with Kakashi's team when they decided to show up? Tsunade asked, nodding. She gestured toward Aang's group. Yes, Hokage-sama, ever since we first met, they have been incredibly helpful, Guy responded. Katara is also a very skilled healer. Sakura nodded as Tsunade looked at her and said, she helped speed along Kakashi's healing after using his Magankyo Sharingan. As Tsunade spoke to Katara, she bowed her head and said, it will be interesting to evaluate your skills. Aang said, we have expected as much, while the others gave a nod. When Toph said, we had a nice warm-up at the village earlier, she clenched her teeth. The Nara father and son arrived after another knock. You wanted to see us, Hokage-sama? Shikaku looked at the unidentified guests and asked. Tsunade replied, Yes, we are waiting for Inoichi before we begin. And who are they? With his usual slack tone, Shikamaru inquired. They're the reason we are waiting for Yamanaka. Nara, the younger, sighed. I believe we're going to need to move locations, it's getting crowded in here, said Kakashi. Shizune, prepare the conference room and make sure the advisors don't find out about this, Tsunade said. She bowed, yes Tsunade-sama, and walked away. Shizune and Inoichi arrived back simultaneously. Tsunade said, let's move to the conference room, and the others in the room followed. Tsunade stood near a Konoha banner along the opposite wall of the table, with Shikaku, Shikamaru, Inoichi, and Shizune to one side and the two teams on the other, while the gang stood in the center. Shizune had set up the room, so the table was pushed to the side and chairs were strewn about, and they entered the room to await orders. I'm going to have this gentleman, Tsunade said, pointing to Inoichi, prove to me that you are who you are. She was staring at Aang. He'll get inside your head. Aang extended his hand. No offense, your majesty, but some things in my mind need to stay there and they are not allowed to be shared with others. Tsunade replied, just as well, but I still require it before I can have to stay here without being under a constant watch. Naruto turned to face her, hands on his hips, and said, Ba-chan, you can't believe them, we've been with them the whole time. Her response to him was, no Naruto, I cannot, I need to have it verified. Is there a compromise we can make? I don't want to end up hurting your man here if he goes places that aren't allowed. Aang asked Katara for support. Yes Hokage, I can do that, Tsunade said in a whisper after giving it some thought. Inoichi grabbed a small table. Lee and Neji were told to remove the banner they were standing in front of, and Shizune was told to bring out a projector and connect a chakra sensor to one of Inoichi's hands. 2 chairs were set up behind the small table for Aang and Inoichi to sit in. This projector, Tsunade clarified, will enable everyone in the room to see what you are going to show us, allowing you to keep an eye on what we see and don't see. Do you think this will work? Katara stood by his side, still holding one of his hands, while Toph, Sokka, and Suki surrounded him. Toph pulled out one of her rods and held it to her side. Aang nodded and then sat in the chair that was designated for him. When Sokka responded to her query, it's a precaution, Tsunade gave her a sidelong glance. Although Aang has perfected the avatar state, intense emotions can occasionally set it off. And since someone else will be pulling up memories, it could be harder for him to suppress it, Katara said. Do we need to have him sealed? Tsunade inquired. Toph pushed Katara, saying, no need, he's got his lucky charm. I won't let it happen. Katara grinned and took the pledge. With a nod, Tsunade said, let's start. While Aang's eyes were open, observing the wall, Inoichi closed his eyes intently and placed one hand on his forehead. Start farther back, he said, his voice a little strained. When he stopped at a younger Aang sitting in a larger room with older men around him in a large meeting area, Inoichi followed instructions. He was told he was the avatar and given his old play toys as proof, and they witnessed his struggle, which finally resulted in him running away and freezing himself in a block of ice. As the screen turned white for the next 5 minutes, Aang instructed him to skip ahead and stop. They watched as he regained consciousness and looked into Katara's younger face. On their way to the Southern Air Temple, he experienced his first significant avatar state trigger, which caused a few people in the room to gasp. Aang winced, but Katara remained steadfast and held his hand. Kakashi gave him a suspicious look, which Sokka saw. He said solemnly, you haven't seen anything yet, and he returned his focus to the wall, reliving the devastation caused by Aang. Their lives' events flashed by, and then suddenly Aang found himself standing in front of Roku's statue. He gave the order, skip ahead, don't watch that. They made their way through his memories until they came to the Northern Water Tribe and the ensuing assault, the sounds of battle echoing in the room as everyone watched with blank expressions, and then Yu led them to the koi fish pond, where Aang stopped them again. Inoichi flipped through quickly until Aang stopped them as the temple collapsed. Aang said, don't watch that, everyone close your eyes, in a slightly strained tone. What takes place during that period? Naruto inquired. According to Aang, I can't speak of it, only I'm allowed to know. When Sokka and Katara saved him from Zuko, he stopped Inoichi and allowed everyone to open their eyes. Tsunade's eyes widened as Aang changed La, the ocean spirit, and caused chaos. He choked and tried not to let his feelings get the better of him because La's rage was strong and reliving it through memories was still painful for him. Katara leaned down and kissed his forehead. Whispering, shush, it's in the past, she said. When Roku took him up to explain the avatar state and its dangers, Aang had to skip once more. The younger ninjas laughed a little when Toph introduced him, and Azula's pursuit gave the room a better understanding of the issues they faced, as well as another display of power. Appa's kidnapping also allowed them to see Aang's less than gentle and laid-back side as they saw his rage at losing someone he cared about, his jaw tense in his own rage. Observing the eyes fixed on the wall, Sokka muttered, "Remain calm." With a sharp tone, Aang answered, "That's one culture I'm glad to not have to see again." "Aang, control your anger," Katara reprimanded her husband after glancing at him. The fight between Aang and Azula demonstrated how dangerous and vindictive she was, and he sighed without being able to nod his assent. They proceeded on their journey, battling the giant water serpent, earning a cheer from Naruto and a chuckle from Sakura. Both Suki and Sokka laughed when they said, "Damn Aang, you just blew her off the drill." "Her fault for getting in the way," he grinned. They weren't shocked by the level of corruption in the city once they got into Ba Sing Se. The memories went on until Aang was struck by lightning and everything turned black. Since this is where he died, he didn't know what to expect here, and then faces began to appear. "No!" he yelled, shocking the eerily quiet room, and instantly seized control of his thoughts, causing Inoichi to gasp and cut the connection. Aang put his head in his hands and they both breathed heavily. With both hands on his shoulders, Katara said, "Look at me." Feeling every eye on him, Aang steadied his breathing and said, "I'm sorry," in a quiet voice. "What's the reason for your apology?" Tsunade raised an eyebrow and said, "From the looks of it." Gazing into Katara's eyes, Aang told her, "I needed to stop," and she gave him a calm smile. She smiled at him and said, "You've been able to stop it every time it happens. Concentrate and breathe." Looking at Inoichi, Tsunade said, "How are you?" "I'm all right. You guys are fortunate not to be feeling his feelings as well, just the images and sounds. He fell asleep. Want to go on?" "I still have more to tell," Aang said, glancing at him, "but what happens might not be." His smile said, "I'll be all right." To Aang, "When I wake up, let's begin." Katara used the spirit water that was given to her to bring me back after I passed away. There I stopped there because my spirit was healing itself. That shouldn't be seen by anyone. Tsunade nodded to Inoichi, "We understand," and went on. "Are you prepared?" he inquired. "I am," said Aang, taking Katara's hand once more. Aang never stopped him again until right before the lion turtle appeared, and Inoichi located the spot where he was waking up in a metal ship before projecting it onto the screen. There were faint blue flashes from his previous lives, but nothing was visible or audible. "I was eager to see what you actually accomplished prior to the war," Sokka muttered, drawing a punch from Suki and Toph. "Some things, Sokka, only Aang needs to know," Katara said, rolling her eyes. They could see airships approaching and they were causing a great deal of fire, so Aang told him to stop when a green light appeared, briefly blinding everyone in the room. "What is this?" Astonished, Neji asked. "That's the power of our fire benders with the aid of a comet," Sokka said. "Try imagining it as having the power of 100 suns in each human being." A fight broke out, and Katara winced as she saw Aang being beaten down by the evil Fire Lord. Aang's jaw tensed at the memory, and then there was a pause, during which he gasped in pain as his back struck the rock, and Inoichi uncontrollably flinched as he felt the same impact through the bond. Then, a plethora of people with glowing eyes flashed before their eyes, and both Aang and Inoichi gasped. Aang choked out, "Get out of my body," and Inoichi instantly changed perspectives. His roar reverberated throughout the room as Aang conjured all 4 elements into a protective shield and chased off the Fire Lord, his eyes and tattoos glowing with a fierce expression. "You engaged in combat like that despite the fact that it was risky for you to do so?" Stunned by what she was seeing, Katara asked him. "I didn't have control," he said to her in a somewhat strained tone. They watched as he summoned boulder-sized fireballs and moved mountains with a flick of his wrist. Then his eyes returned to normal as he announced the Fire Lord's final demise, and the final moment of the combining of the 4 elements came. "Stay out of my head, you don't want to be inside for the next part," Aang told you. "You're still weak, despite all the power in the world," yelled the Fire Lord. Anticipating his next move, Aang pinned his arms and legs to the ground, covered the Fire Lord's heart and mind with his hands, and waited. "Are you certain?" Katara inquired with regret. Aang said to her, "She needs to know." A moment later, the Fire Lord and Aang were both illuminated in orange and white, and Aang's breathing quickly deteriorated as the darker hue took over. With a fierce whisper, Toph pulled her rod tight around Aang's chest and wrapped it around his torso. "Get a grip, this isn't happening now," she said. A deep, booming voice was heard just before Aang's body was taken over, and then Aang's body glowed white, defeating the orange. The tension in the room subsided as Aang confirmed that the Fire Lord was not killed and told Inoichi to stop. As Inoichi took his hand and the chakra sensor off his finger, the wall returned to its natural color, and for several minutes no one spoke, waiting to hear Tsunade's response. Finally saying, "I guess they were right," she gave Katara the scroll, which she opened to reveal the following. "Hokage-sama, I am aware that this is not a conventional report, but during one of our sessions, Kami revealed to Lord Shiriko that he should expect assistance from a great warrior. Someone who would not be well known in this world, but whom he should completely trust, who possesses a unique spirit that gives him control over the material world, but who is not a power-hungry creature. If such a man happens to cross your path, keep him close. Rishu Monk Fire Temple. I suppose the only thing they didn't tell you was what he looked like," Katara said, reading it aloud before rolling the scroll back up. Tsunade nodded. "That's why I required the evidence. I need to know who I can trust and who I can't when it comes to something as delicate as the Akatsuki." "Well, I hope you have it. I know that our war may have seemed petty or easy, but it was the most difficult thing we've ever experienced," Sokka replied to her. "Considering your ages, I am confident that what you did was an easy task. You were 12 years old when all of this occurred, right?" Tsunade inquired. "Yes, Toph and I share the same age, so I was. Sokka and Suki are 4 years older than us, and Katara is 2 years older," he replied. Lee saluted Aang and his companions, saying, "It would be an honor if I could be so bold as to ask for a sparring match with each of these noble warriors." They laughed. Tenten said, "Only you would have that much energy," with a sigh. Guy grinned at her and said, "Tenten, there's nothing to be ashamed of in Lee's youthful power." Aside from Lee's overly enthusiastic remark, "I too would like to spar," Neji said, rolling his eyes. 3 figures suddenly rushed through the door. "What does this mean, Tsunade?" Hotaru insisted. When Tsunade saw who was with the 2 advisors, her eyes narrowed in disgust, and she muttered, "Danzo." Before Sakura took the paper Tsunade pointed to, she was searching through the documents on her master's desk along with Naruto, Team Guy, and the gang. She left the office guy Sensei, Inoichi, and Kakashi remained with Tsunade. Sakura waved the paper and said, "Okay, here we go, the place we have ready for you." Naruto declared, "Everyone follow me. First things first, Sakura-chan, ramen." Everyone followed Naruto as he led them out of the Hokage's tower. Momo stirred when he saw them leave the building after Appa grunted. Appa moaned, "I know you're tired, I'll call you when I know where we're staying." Aang approached him and said, "Hey there buddy, you and Momo go ahead and do some exploring near the village, just try not to get into trouble, alright?" To Appa's chagrin, Momo chose to remain with Aang, but he left to find a lovely meadow for a snack. Many people who saw the group stopped and stared as they continued to walk through Konoha's streets, but the group remained unfazed by the attention until they arrived at Ichiraku's. "Hi, Tucci. Today is a big party for you," Naruto declared as he entered the tiny store. "Hello Naruto," he said, pausing when he saw the unfamiliar faces, "and who could be your friends?" He took his customary seat and rubbed his hands together. "Oh, this is Aang and his friends. They're here to help us fight off the Akatsuki," he said. "Well, welcome to my shop, fellow ninjas. Today's first meal is on me," he said. "Does that apply to me?" With excitement, Naruto asked. The scowl Tucci received made him laugh. "No Naruto, it's not your first time," he said. "Thank you for the free meal, but we're not ninjas, just warriors," Aang replied. "Technically we're benders," Toph explained, grabbing chopsticks after feeling around the table. She was told by Sokka, "Hey, not all of us are benders." She responded to his taunt by saying, "True, some of us are crybabies." While Neji smiled, Naruto, Sakura, Lee, and Tenten all laughed. "Even after all these years, I saved your life and I still get no respect," Sokka said, squinting his eyes. "Consider it this way, Sokka. You would immediately realize that I detested you or didn't want to speak with or be around you if I ever stopped making fun of you." Toph slapped him in the arm and told him, "Think of my teasing as an alternative to being hit." Sokka grinned and rubbed his arm, saying, "Well, the day you stop making fun of me is the day I should find out what I did to really irritate you, isn't that right?" "That's right," was her response. All of the seated guests were served Naruto's favorite dish, miso ramen with pork slices. "Enjoy," by Tucci. After saying, "And here is tea for everyone," Ayame placed tiny cups in front of the group. After saying his traditional line, Naruto started eating his ramen and finished it at a record-breaking speed. "You were right, Naruto," Katara remarked in between mouthfuls, "this place is amazing." He chuckled, "If you're ever hungry for good food, this is the place to go." When they were done at Ichiraku's, Sakura took them to the house where they would spend the rest of their stay here. A moderate sixth house with a large flat roof on which Appa could sleep, reinforced with seals to ensure its durability, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen, and a gathering place, all a block from the Hokage Tower. Sakura opened the door and said, "Well, this is it, we have a hotel, but obviously Tsunade felt you would be here for more than a few days." The young adults came into the house. "It will be ideal for us," Katara assured her as she entered the kitchen. "You'll find it fully stocked with non-perishables. Anything like fresh fruits or vegetables you will have to buy," Sakura advised her. "Looks like Tsunade-sama left you some money here on the table." Opening the bag with wide eyes, Katara said, She can, despite what you might think, helping people for a living is a good living in every way. The general circulation of money is also financed in part by these taxes. Additionally, the lifespan of a shinobi is usually not very long." Katara interrupted her before she became uneasy, saying, "I see where you're going with this, Sakura," and she thanked her for her hospitality. "This generosity won't be forgotten." "Well, from what I've seen and heard about you guys, it's the least we can do for you," Sakura said with a slight bow. "You made a huge sacrifice by leaving your home and your entire world to come here and face the unknown. Do not be afraid to ask for help if you need it when I'm in town. You can find me working at Hokage Tower, the hospital, or my apartment." Aang and Neji were chatting as they walked into the sitting area, where everyone was relaxing. "So even when your body is worn out, you can still bend?" Intrigued, Neji asked. "Yes, in theory, we are not required to bend the components of only a portion of our identities, like you do. In order to shape chakra, that's why his body had to adapt to the physical toll that I inflicted on the Fire Lord," Aang replied, and Neji took note of his careful wording. "That's interesting," he said, "so why aren't you two able to bend?" "We weren't born with it," Suki replied. "It's a genetic thing to be a bender." Indeed, when the Fire Nation used to attack our tribe in the south, they removed all of the benders, making it impossible to make another bender that might pose a threat. However, anomalies do occur, Sokka said with a smile to his sister. "So I'm a freak?" She raised an eyebrow in question. "You bet you are," he said with a laugh. She muttered as she sat next to Aang, "You're lucky I love you," and he put a consoling arm around her. Neji said, "All right, I have another question." "Sure," said Aang. "It's actually for Katara," he explained. "You guys used water to fight the village earlier, and then you used ice. How is it possible for you that two distinct types of chakra are being fused together in this world?" "Well, in our world, ice and water are the same thing," Katara said with a smile. "I can naturally control water in all its forms, including ice, because I am a master waterbender." "So ice and water are the same to you, and it's not something different?" he asked. "Yes, I can become more disciplined the more I practice. I keep them filled with water for bending, just like these bags here," she said, gesturing to the ones she placed on the ground. "However, I have practiced drawing water from my surroundings and using it if I run out," she said, swishing her hand in the air to draw moisture to her fingers. "There is another type of advanced water bending that I no longer practice. Aang hasn't even learned it from me." "What is it?" Tenten inquired. "Bloodbending," she responded with a slight whisper. "It's where I can take control of another person's bodily fluids and literally bend them to my will. Physically only, not psychologically." Neji murmured, "Impressive, over the quiet. I was duped into learning it by a corrupt waterbender. I didn't even intend to do so, not wanting them to think poorly of her," she explained. "At the moment, I can only control or use it during the full moon, but if I were to practice it religiously like my other bending, then I would be able to utilize it without the help of the full moon." "Why is the moon full?" Curious, Lee asked. "Well, that's because the first water benders used spirits from the moon and the ocean. The tribes wanted to learn because of how harmonious their relationship was." As Katara leaned into Aang's reassuring embrace, she explained, "The power emanating from the moon's full exposure means that I can push and pull the water easier than on any other night." "Aang, are you able to bend every element as well? Are you feeling the same way?" Sakura inquired. "I do," he replied. "I feel the freedom of the air, the pull of the moon, the earth's whisperings, and the passion of fire inside of me." "Do you always answer so mystically?" pouted Naruto. Sokka's statement, "Yes he does, you get used to it or just ignore it," caused Naruto to smile. "So, are bloodbending and other specializations present in all of your elements?" Getting back on track, Neji asked. "Yes, they do," Aang said with a laugh. "Since metal is merely a refined manifestation of earth, Toph created metal bending. That one is especially difficult to master because it can only be done by someone who is proficient in Toph's earthbending technique." "It was damn straight," she said. "Lightning is the purest expression of fire. The problem with lightning is that it's uncontrollable," Aang replied. "The only thing you can do is create it and aim it at your opponent. If you get hit by it and are unable to properly redirect it, you die." "How about for air?" Naruto inquired. "I'm not aware of anything since I'm regarded as a master. I believe I would have either been informed or found something by now. It's my natural element," he replied thoughtfully. But have you actually looked for something similar? Sokka questioned him. Now that I think about it, no I haven't, but at that moment, Sakura heard a knock on the door and rose to answer it. Azumo handed Sakura the scroll and looked around her into the room. A message from the Hokage for the guests, he said. Sakura shut the door after saying, Thank you, Azumo. Who wants to open it? It's not addressed to me. I will, Katara said, pausing as she looked over the scroll. What does it say, then? Impatiently, Naruto inquired. It seems you and Sakura are to meet her in her office in an hour, and the rest of us are welcome to tour the city until we are needed. Katara concluded the letter. Are you able to go on missions? With excitement, Naruto asked. Katara said, It doesn't say, my guess is no, and rolled it back up. In any case, we won't merely pry into your affairs unless absolutely necessary. We're not here to take over, but to assist, Aang stated. Well, we can train with you powerful heroes to pass the time. We can meet at the training grounds whenever you want to spar, Lee exclaimed, pumping his fist enthusiastically. Tenten smiled and reminded him, Lee, they don't know where the training grounds are. I wouldn't mind getting a decent map of this city, that way we don't have to rely on someone showing us around, Sokka said with a smile. Then, should we visit the library? Sakura volunteered naively. Toph let out a groan. Oh, did you desire to stay? Sakura looked a bit sheepish. In front of her eyes, Toph waved her hands. Unless there's something to listen to, I really could destroy an entire library and not feel bad at all, she said. Sakura says, Oh, I'm so sorry, I totally forgot, with haste. Don't worry about it, Toph said with a laugh, I'm used to people forgetting. I have to admit, it's amazing that you can see as well as you do, almost eerie-like, Tenten said. She whispered, blowing her bangs out of her face, Yeah, I know, trust me, sometimes I wish I didn't have this ability. Neji avoided making eye contact. Lee and Naruto remained a little perplexed. Sakura blushed as the hidden message was revealed, and the two married couples giggled. What did I miss, I wonder? Naruto inquired. Nothing, they all said simultaneously. Sakura-chan, tell me, he whimpered, frowning. She muttered firmly, You had Jiraiya as a master, surely you know a perverted joke when you hear one. When he looked at Aang and Katara, who were both grinning at his naivete, his face flushed. Aang retorted, We are entitled because we are married, even though I'll admit that I was equally shy when I was younger. With age and meaningful relationships, it disappears. Sokka said, nicely worded, and nodded. Right, Naruto said, his cheeks blushing a little. Before things became more awkward, Sakura interrupted, saying, I think we were going to the library, remember, to get a map. Sokka, Suki, and the others got up and said, Yes, a map of the village would be great. Perhaps we can get together later and carry on our conversation if none of you are busy tonight. Neji smiled amiably and said, I'm still very interested in knowing more about you and your abilities. Sokka joked, extending his hand to Neji, Dude, we're visitors in a foreign world and we don't even know our way around. We have nothing better to do than to sit around and twiddle our thumbs. After giving him a brief glance, he took his hand and shook it before saying, This evening then I'll be by again. Sokka said, We looked forward to it, before departing. Tenten spoke, Wow, what? Katara inquired. Neji has changed a lot since then. He wouldn't have even acknowledged you 2 or 3 years ago, and here he is grinning and shaking hands with total strangers, she informed them, her smile growing larger. I don't understand, Sokka said, furrowing her brows. Our people consider Neji to be a genius, Lee explained. He knew he had these skills and he never let people forget how good he was. Lee said that his Byakugan and natural instinct made him a prodigy. With a slight smile on his face, Naruto remarked, Neji was a very cold person inside and out until his battle with me. He thought destiny was something that was handed to you and not something that you could change. His perspective on life was impacted by his childhood branding. However, he became upbeat after I corrected him, and he is now a good man. Yes, he is, Tenten concurred as Katara whispered to Sakura and Suki, in more ways than one. Tenten turned to face the 3 women, her cheeks blushing slightly. Thought so, Katara said with a laugh as she approached her. Is he aware? She gave a firm shake of her head, saying, Don't please, he's still, it's just. Katara said, Don't worry, your secret is safe with us, as she looked at the additional people. Well, Tenten, ask me anything you want to know about the truth, even if Katara or someone else were to say it in jest, Toph told her, smirking. I can always pinpoint it during conversation. Body reactions never lie, he said, folding her arms. Thanks, she said, a little bashful of the attention she was receiving. All right, Lee said with a smile to his teammate, to the library. When Sokka received a free map, he was thrilled and immediately wanted to mark down places like their house and Ichiraku's ramen restaurant. Naruto insisted that they mark down the locations of the hospital, the Hokage's tower, and Sakura's apartment. Naruto took her suggestion and marked down his own residence as well. Lee indicated his preferred training spot in case anyone wanted to spar with him. Tenten pointed out the usual training grounds, and another good restaurant for dangos. As they were all making their way back to their home, a giant white dog attacked Naruto. Akamaru. As the dog licked his face and barked, he screamed. When Sakura saw Kiba approaching Shino, she burst out laughing. "Hey Akamaru, lick him good," Kiba called. "Kiba, once your damn dog gets off me, I'll get you," screamed Naruto. "Hey," in any case, Kiba called him off, and the dog sat on his haunches. "Oi, Akamaru, leave him alone for the time being." As he wiped the dog drool from his face, Naruto grinned and said, "Is that how you greet an old friend you haven't seen in 2 years? You've definitely matured." Naruto filled out a bit. Kida chuckled. "You no longer appear to be a fool." Naruto smiled and shot back, "Speak for yourself. You looked as idiotic as I did and acted like it too." "Bah, quit your lying. I was better than you and you know it," Kida grumbled. "Says the guy who got beaten by me in the Chunin exams," Naruto teasingly responded. Sakura interrupted before the situation heated up, saying, "Naruto, that's enough, there are others present. This is Aang, Katara, Sokka, Suki, and Toph." He stood between Katara and Aang and put his arms around their shoulders. "Oh, that's right, you guys have to meet our new friends," he said. "Their purpose is to assist us in combating the Akatsuki guys. This is Kiba, his dog Akamaru, and..." Naruto narrowed his eyes as he looked at Shino. "Do you not remember my name, Naruto? We've known each other for more than 3 years, Shino grumbled. "What do you expect, Shino? You cover up 90% of your body," Kiba muttered, rolling his eyes. "Shino?" Naruto said, eyes widening. "Shino. I apologize for that," he said, scratching his head. "Hey everyone, this is Shino." "Gee Naruto, how can you forget the name of your own friend?" They all laughed. Toph chuckled as he asked. "Well, I forgot. I just got back from a training mission that took 2 years, Toph replied. "Really? You neglected to bring that up," Aang informed him. "Oh haha," he said, placing both hands behind his head. "I suppose I haven't had a chance to tell you more about myself because I have been asking you guys more questions." Sakura teased, "Naruto isn't hogging the spotlight for once." "What does that mean, Sakura-chan?" The others laughed as he scowled at her. Kiba remarked, "Well, at least you haven't changed too much." Aang looked at the corner of the wooden wall where the visitor was trembling, and Naruto saw his obsession. Aang and Toph sensed another presence, and they both knew the person was very nervous. "What are you staring at, Aang?" He followed his line of sight and asked. "Oh, nothing really, there's someone really nervous on the other side of that wall there, at the corner," he responded while pointing. With narrowed eyes, Kiba said, "How do you know that?" "He's not the only one who can feel her trembling." "Smart one," Toph replied. He sneered, "I doubt there's anyone there." "Oh Kiba, I would reserve your judgment, they do have an uncanny sense to feel things through the earth," Sakura said with a smirk. Naruto made a little shriek and leapt up away from the group, landing softly on the opposite side of the wall. "Well, the only way to find out who's right is to look," he said. "Hey Hinata, are you okay? Your face is red," they overheard him say to her. "Whoa, Hinata." Sakura suppressed a laugh as Kiba and Shino hurried over. "What's so amusing?" Suki questioned her. "Since our academy days, Hinata has had a major crush on Naruto," Sakura explained. "He doesn't realize it, and every time he speaks to her she gets all red in the face and faints. Apparently, she's back to square one again, even though Hinata was able to talk to him without fainting before he left for 2 years." As Kiba and Shino carried Hinata beneath a tree, they all grinned and giggled. When Sakura approached her and took a tiny vial from her pocket, she held it up to Hinata's nose, causing the girl to blink awake. Upon realizing that everyone was standing above her, she felt immediately ashamed. "Hello Hinata, are you okay?" Her face flushed once more as her gaze shot up to Naruto, who posed the question. She whispered to him, "And Naruto, I didn't know you were home," while attempting to keep her eyes open. His smile made her smile back. "Yeah, I had my first mission and everything already," he said. "Wouldn't it be clearer?" Suki spoke to Katara in a whisper. "Yeah, I can't believe he doesn't see it," Katara acknowledged in a whisper. Suki gave Sakura a nod and said, "That's because he's preoccupied with someone else." "I dunno," Katara said, peering at Sakura after Naruto. "Watch and see." She may see him as a regular teammate or brother, but he sees her as more than that, Suki said. As Naruto called her name while introducing Hinata to their group, Katara nodded. Do you now believe them, Kiba? Smugly, Naruto asked. You know what? His eyes narrowed as he asked. He nudged, that they can feel things with the earth. Tenten said, just admit it, Kiba, you saw it. I believe they were fortunate Hinata was on her way here, and we're meeting Kurenai-sensei here for a mission, Kiba explained. Do you want additional evidence? Toph inquired, a little irritated. Like what? He raised an eyebrow in question. She said, I'm different from the rest of you here. In case you haven't noticed already, I'm blind. I can tell you exactly what you look like to demonstrate my ability to see through the earth. You're kidding, he snorted. Are you too shy to be touched by a woman, or am I not? She resisted having hands on her hips. Kiba stood up straight. All right. While the rest of the group waited, Toph cracked her knuckles. Sakura grinned. Naruto shifted his feet excitedly. Tenten began to giggle. Lee's eyes were wide with attention, and Shino and Hinata simply watched patiently. You're about a whole head taller than me when I stand up straight, Toph said. Standing directly in front of him with his head cocked downward, she gripped his wrists precisely and said, kinda bony but little to no body fat. When Kiba's hands suddenly touched his face, he was shocked. Her hands were firm, tough, and commanding, but they were also soft, as if she had never cut herself. Kiba's cheeks turned slightly pink. You have angular cheekbones and either a tattoo or paint on your face. I suppose they're triangular on both sides as well, she said, putting her fingers to his lips as her head raised to reveal her grayed eyes. Slightly longer canine teeth, Kita held his breath because she was making him feel ecstatic and driving him insane. No one had ever broken his bubble like she did. Slow down. Sweetheart, I'm not causing you any anxiety, am I? She grinned at him because she knew that her deliberate eye fluttering and her silky trousers were making him crazy, as evidenced by his fast rising heart rate. The group around him laughed as she moved her hands lower down his chest, leaving Kita speechless as she stared into her eyes. Her lips slightly parted, and he could feel her breath on his lips just a little bit. He wanted to kiss her. Nice, you maintain your fitness level, six-pack? With innocence, she inquired. Why yeah, was his response. What about? She muttered as she lowered her hands gradually. Enough of that, he shouted as he leapt away from her. Kiba's humiliation had everyone rolling on the ground. Well, do you think I described you accurately? If your pulse was any indication, I believe you had a clear view of my eyes. It got faster every time I looked up at you, she said shamelessly, placing her hands on her hips. Only after his sensei saved him was Kiba able to swallow. Where is Kiba, Shino, Hinata? Kurenai inquired after spotting Akamaru without his owner. I'm here, Kurenai-sensei, he called from the top of the bow. Are you all ready? She asked, nodding at him. I didn't know who guys had visitors, she said. Looking around at the sizable crowd, she smiled as she asked. Sakura pointed to their group and remarked, Hey Kurenai-sensei, we met them on our last mission. Tenten grinned and said, not to mention Toph just made Kiba one embarrassed guy. Eyes widening, Kurenai says, I never knew Kiba could get embarrassed that easily. The experience still made Naruto laugh. You should have seen it, he said. We have a scouting mission, so my team needs to get going. Kiba descends from that point. These visitors will definitely be around, she inquired. The response from Aang was, we are staying here for a while. Kiba gave Toph another look before Akamaru barked to get his attention back on track as she nodded and started to walk towards the entrance with her team. Sakura grinned and tsked, well, Kiba has met his match. Staring at Toph, Lee remarked, I don't think I've ever seen Kiba that taken aback. Well, that's Toph, no regards for personal space and always speaks what's on her mind, Sokka said while stretching, gotta love her for it. Agreed, Suki said with a smile and a cheek kiss. When their regular leader and sensei, Kakashi, was still weak from using his jutsu, Mangekyou Sharingan, Naruto promised to stop by before he left on his mission, essentially to let us know how long he'd be gone and anything else he deemed important. Sakura and Naruto were busy the following morning meeting their new team members. How much time does it take to actually meet people? Toph asked in a frustrated tone. As bored as she was, Katara sighed, just be patient, we'll go out as soon as he comes by. We ought to have brought a game, Sokka remarked as she stretched on the ground. Suki closed her eyes and said, yeah, who would have thought we'd actually need a pie show table? As he meditated, Aang grinned to himself and said, be thankful that things are calm at the moment. We are all aware of what is imminent. When you think about it, We really don't know what's going to happen, as with the siege of the North Pole, Ba Sing Se, and the Fire Lord's evil, insane scheme. We had no idea what to anticipate. As Sokka stared at Aang, she remarked, all we know is we're going to fight a bunch of people with unknown powers because according to Neji, they can do just about anything. Isn't this also why we agreed to train with Naruto and his friends to better prepare ourselves for what's going to happen? Asked Aang, who stayed in his position without opening his eyes. It is likely that we will remain here for the full year that Kami promised, therefore, we simply need to participate in as much training as possible. I have the impression that we will enjoy the variety. Suki thought aloud, yeah, it will be interesting to compare my ancestors' fighting style to their taijutsu. Tenten claimed that Lee was the village's top taijutsu expert. The training this afternoon should be enjoyable. Sokka smiled and said, not to mention the weapons training. Huh, easy for you guys to say, I'm just going to be bored, Toph said, causing her eyes to pop out of their sockets. What's the reason? Katara questioned her, because I need to perfect what? I'm already proficient, and I can only practice alone for so long at home before I grow bored. Katara casually remarked, well, I guess you're just going to be bored, or you can try to invent something new. Like what? She tilted her head and asked, to make everyone envious of you. Try a cool new jutsu. Naruto jumped through the window and called out. How was the meeting, Naruto? Katara smiled and asked him. It's unbelievable that Ba-chan paired us with such a moron, scowled Naruto. He's a big, cruel, heartless jerk. Before he could say another word, he stopped. Sokka teased him, saying, wow, sounds like you two get along well already. Snorted Naruto, I'm going to have to go on a mission with this guy, we are not a good team. Well, all new teams take some time to get to know each other. Aang advised him to stay put. Take us for example. The first few days Toph was with us were terrible. That's true, Sokka replied. She was just one big spoiled brat used to getting everything she wanted. She exclaimed in shock, wow, I am in the room. But after taking some time to get to know her, well, you can see the results, Aang said. So he may be bad now, but no worries, things should get better. Well, I wish Tsunade had let you guys come, but I guess she's right, we've kind of got to keep you guys a secret so you're not in danger, Naruto said with a slow smile as he turned to face Aang. However, you will be able to accompany us on missions after completing some training with our shinobi. That'll be better than sitting around here being completely lazy, Sokka said as she returned to her normal position on the ground. Katara sighed loudly, coming from the man who is always last to get up in the morning, which caused the others to laugh. He moaned, not feeling the love. Well, I should be back in a week unless something happens, Naruto said as he raised his backpack. When I get back we're going to train and get you guys ready to become part of the Leaf Shinobi Ninja. Be careful, Naruto, Katara said with a smile. He returned her smile with a, oi, I will be, you have my word. He leapt out of the window. Can we go meet Lee, Tenten, and Neji now that he's gone? Toph stood and asked. Suki concurred, I don't see any other reason to wait. They walked slowly through the village, with Sokka keeping them on course with the map so they wouldn't get lost in the enormous village. They went toward the northeastern section of the village that Lee had marked, and as they approached, they heard a loud counting sound and the sound of metal hitting metal. They then ascended a narrow path to a large wooden building, where they saw the 3 team members and their leader Guy. Lee had just completed 2,000 push-ups when he became aware of their presence. The powerful warriors have arrived. He summoned his teammates who were engaged in combat with kunai knives. Everyone stopped what they were doing and greeted them. Guy remarked, you finally made it, as he stood against the wooden structure. Katara clarified, well, Naruto insisted on seeing us before he left for his mission. Tenten said, sounds like him, grinning. Now that we're here, what's planned? Toph asked without turning to face anyone. Are you eager to spar? Guy inquired. She replied, I've been bored all morning, show me what you got. Guy declared, Lee, you're up first for Miss Toph. The spar will be fantastic, I'm going to love this, Toph, Lee declared, pumping his fist in the air. Her knuckles cracked as she said, yeah, hyperactive, so what are the rules of this spar? None, replied Guy. So, how can we tell when someone is beating us? With excitement, Lee replied, when I can no longer stand or I yield. After saying, fair enough, make room guys, we're going to need it, Toph moved to a more open space. Lee stated, I have only one request, as he assumed his position. What is that? Please do not hold back. Putting her metal rods aside, Toph grinned and said, that won't be a problem. Lee grinned as he observed his opponent, whose peculiar stance made him realize that he would be unlike anyone he had ever encountered. He waited, watching her, but then he needed to release his energy, so he charged head on. Toph slid her right foot over the ground, watching him run forward more quickly than she was used to, and despite his naturally increased speed, she reacted flawlessly. He began by jumping into the air due to a few rock juts, and she immediately anticipated where he would land because he took off at an odd angle. She was motionless until she felt it, a tiny stream of air passing along her left ear. Brushing her hair ever so slightly, a rock wall appeared just in time to stop Lee's kick. When the rock wall was thrust against his foot, causing him to lose his balance for a moment, he gasped, thinking he had her, and skillfully dodged the spears that were sticking out of the ground with his hands before readjusting himself on his feet. As she refocused her attention, he said, "Master Toph, you are quite skilled." She grinned beneath her long bangs and said, "Thanks, I've been practicing. Will you keep me waiting or should I leave now?" Before launching another attack, Lee grinned this time. Toph avoided a wall by circling quickly and grabbing Lee's arm. She didn't anticipate that he would grab one of the rock spears and throw her instead, and she landed hard on the ground with a little gasp. "Are you in pain?" With concern, Lee inquired. She threw off her belt from around her waist and the beige overshirt, leaving her in two skin-tight green pieces of clothing. Leaving her arms and stomach exposed, Lee's eyes bulged out of his head, and beneath that one layer she revealed a toned body as chiseled as his. Toph coughed and stood up, saying, "Are you kidding? It's gonna take more than one fall to keep me down." "You are full of many surprises, truly a trained and mighty warrior," he said. "Is that your indirect way of expressing that you find my appearance appealing?" As she listened to his heartbeat, she teased him. "I apologize, that's not what I meant," he stammered. She started to say, "Hey, it's all right, happens more often than I like, too many lookers and not enough," but stopped short. In order to hide, she immediately raised 3 large rocks and kicked them at him. Instead of taking a blow or attempting to block it, Lee leapt over them and landed directly behind her. Toph smirked and then punched on her own, bringing another rock with her. They exchanged fists for a few seconds before Toph took 2 solid blows to the face. She growled again as she slipped past her defense and put some distance between her and Lee. He leapt forward instantly, and the instant he hit the ground, he sank. When he looked up at her again, he saw her hands on the ground. "You made it softer?" he inquired. "Yup, had to gain the upper hand somehow since you got through to me 3 times, she said with a grin. "I apologize if I hurt you," Lee said, nodding. Her words, "hurt me, PSSSH, you showed me my weak points," brought him slowly to his feet. Guy strode forward and said, "I wouldn't call you weak," adding that Lee isn't beaten every day. She said, "Well, he's not a bender, the only one who can thoroughly compete with me is Aang," as Lee returned to his full altitude. Lee grinned at her and said, "That would be a great battle to watch." "Unfortunately, Naruto made us promise not to have it until he could watch," Aang replied. Katara approached Toph and said, "Here, let me." Despite her complaints, she continued, "They're just bruises." Everyone sparred with Lee for the remainder of their afternoon, and by the time it was all over, he was hardly exhausted. "What sort of a man are you? You have so much energy, it's almost ridiculous," Suki said. In response to her, Lee chuckled, saying, "I've worked very hard to become the best." Lee is unable to use ninjutsu or genjutsu because he lacks chakra, Tenten explained. A little worn out, he practices taijutsu all day, so he's the best in that area. "I understand, but don't you all require chakra to survive?" Sokka drank from a water bag and asked. "Yes, but chakra requires both spiritual and physical energy for ninjutsu and genjutsu. We haven't been able to determine why Lee, for some reason, needs chakra to survive, but his capacity to shape it is lacking," Neji said. Lee pumped his fist once more while maintaining a serious expression. "But I have become a fine shinobi without the use of chakra," he said. Guy grinned at his student and said, "Yes, you have Lee, but there's still more to do." "Hi, Guy-sensei." Lee saluted in response. Tenten and Neji both sighed. Katara said, "I see where you get your energy from," as she dressed the bruises Lee had given her. "Is it ever resolved?" Sokka asked Neji the question. "Never," he smirked and rolled his eyes. Guy grinned, flashing his teeth. "No negative attitudes here, Neji. Sokka, train harder to attain the same energy," he said. "I don't mean to bother you, but is there somewhere with a good amount of water, a river or something?" Katara inquired. "There's a good-sized river at the 3rd training grounds about a kilometer away to the east," Guy replied with a point. "I'm going to waterbend," Katara smiled. "Would you like to practice, Aang?" "I'd love to," he said as he rose. "May I observe?" Tenten asked eagerly. Katara grinned and said, "Sure, you're all welcome to come," as everyone stood up. Guy said, "I think it'll be fun to watch the real thing." Guy's implication made Aang smile. "Yes, it's definitely different in person than through memories," she said. They watched Appa fly overhead while taking a leisurely stroll to the river. "Come on, buddy." When his partner grabbed him out of the air and performed a series of loops before releasing him, Aang called out. Leaping into the air, he then jumped straight at the ground, adjusted his position, and cushioned his landing. Tenten eyed Katara and muttered, "I don't know how you can stand that." Simply shrugging, she said, "I get used to it, although it never fails to make me heart skip a beat." Katara started taking off her clothes until she realized that some people might find this offensive. "Sorry, but are you guys okay? I'm used to practicing without so many layers," she said. "Whatever makes you most comfortable," Guy replied. With both feet planted firmly on the ground for emphasis, she sat on the ground and said, "Don't worry, Katara, I'll keep these unmarried men away from you." They all gasped at his back as Aang joined her, taking off his robe to reveal himself only in his pants. As Tenten muttered, "That scar," Aang paused, turned to face his back, and shrugged his shoulders before going into the water close to Katara. "Oh yeah, where I was shot." "Is your entire body covered in those blue tattoos?" Neji inquired, shifting the topic. Aang replied, "Yes, I received them after I was declared a master at airbending." "Start easy." With her hands running over the water's surface, Katara posed the question. "Yes, exactly the same as before?" he inquired. She grinned. "Yeah, same as always, though." The ninjas noticed the small increase in water that they bended as they started more complex movements. It was smooth and elegant, just like the gentle fist, and it was the complete opposite of the earth bending they had seen earlier. Neji was enthralled with the way they moved. They held a large sphere of water above their heads before Aang smirked at Katara, who shrugged her shoulders. Everyone watched intently as she brushed her hand over the top, bringing a decent blob of water up with her. The river moved slowly around their bodies, allowing them to sway easily with the bending movements. It rained suddenly as they released the water on top of them, and Suki was startled but laughed along with the ninjas. Sokka saw exactly what they were thinking, but he said nothing. Toph and Suki were clearly not paying attention, and he looked at the ninjas and saw that they were too preoccupied with them in general to notice that the large glob of water was now above them instead of the bender's hands. Aang grinned as he walked out of the river and said, "We decided to help you all out because we thought you guys looked a little warm." Aang approached the group and said, "If you would like to be instantly dry, I can help you with that." Neji frowned a little at his inattention. Neji accepted the offer and was pleased with the outcome. Tenten also accepted the offer as the air blew her hair out of her buns. Neji looked at her hair and the way it framed her face, and he immediately turned away, straightening his clothes. Toph smirked as she shifted her feet to face him and nudged Suki, who took the hint and grinned. She looked lovely with her hair down, and Neji took another look at her before turning away once more, his face impassive. She was whispered to by Suki, "Yup, that's it, hair needs to go down." "You should have felt it the first time." "Shock and awe," Toph said with a laugh. The rest of the week was the same. The gang would wake up, Katara made breakfast, then they went to train all afternoon. By evening they were tired but not enough to sleep. Aang usually took this time to meditate while the others just lounged around relaxing from their workout. Sokka and Suki noticed they were able to adapt easily to the taijutsu style of fighting, whereas the benders were having more of a struggle with it. Tenten helped to train them in throwing kunai knives and shuriken, explaining that they were the most popular ninja tools used. So while Tenten and Lee would train Sokka and Suki in taijutsu and shuriken jutsu, Neji and Guy would assist the benders with their practice. Guy, who was just as good at taijutsu or even better than Lee, also used ninjutsu to keep the benders on their feet. Neji found that his gentle fist yielded the same results as other unfortunate opponents. If he hit them in the right spots on their bodies, they would lose the ability to bend and sometimes the function of their arms. Katara remarked, "This has only happened to me once," as Suki applied pressure to her pressure points to break the bind. One girl from the Fire Nation, Tai Li, her method of attack and defense was hitting pressure points same as you. "But it appears that it's just the pressure points for you," Neji said, nodding. "From the points I strike, we also lose the capacity to release chakra or shape charka." "I guess that is the biggest difference," Aang replied. "Since bending is more of who we are, it only makes sense for us to lose our ability to move rather than bending altogether." "But I still couldn't bend," Katara remarked while rubbing her shoulder with some healing water. "Because you also lost the movement of your arm," Aang replied. "No, sometimes I wouldn't be able to bend when I fought Tai Li, but I could still move," she pondered. "However, are you able to move your arms?" Aang inquired. "Not very well," Katara said after giving it some thought. "I'm hungry. Do you guys want to go get some food?" Toph yawned. Tenten grinned at the group that was holding Neji. "I'm up for dangos. Anyone else?" he said. "Sounds good to me," stated Katara. "Gosh, more time to spend together away from training, Lee exclaimed. Don't forget Team Guy, we have a mission tomorrow. Meet at the front gates an hour after dawn, Guy said with a smile. Hello. The group called together at the end of the conversation. Everyone agreed that she was right and that they didn't want to get lazy because they never knew when they would be called on to help. Aang was interrupted by a knock on their door after dinner. Team Guy was going on a mission, so their training was put on hold unless someone else came over and wanted to ask them to join. Toph had already made the decision to return to the wooden building, or dojo as Lee had called it, to maintain her physical stamina. Katara's voice floated to his ears. Oh Kakashi, please come in, she said. Feeling her shuffle to the window, Aang grinned. Aang, she called, someone's here. Appa's eyes were closed, so Aang sat up and rubbed his nose. Be right down, he said to her. Good night buddy. Katara had gotten tea for everyone, and he leapt lightheartedly through the window, landing in the center of the sitting room. I see you've been given a shogi table, Kakashi said. Some of our most brilliant strategists practice with that game. Strategists? Sokka inquired. Kakashi replied. I believe you will find Shikamaru Nara a very worthy opponent. Do they learn from this? Sokka asked with a smile. I got this book from the woman who sold me the game. Kakashi gave a second nod. I think you'll also notice the more you study that game, the more our formations and battle strategies will make sense. I've never been much of a reader, Sokka said, nodding. If you're not going to, Suki began, snatching it out of his hand with ease. He frowned at her and said, Hey, I never finished my sentence, but he knew he would lose and didn't try to take the book back. After taking a moment to assess the space, Kakashi said, It looks like you guys have been training. May I ask with whom? Tsunade granted the guys' team a week off because they had 2 consecutive A-rank missions. As Katara sipped her tea, she replied, They have been kind enough to teach us the ins and outs of your world in combat. I think his team is probably the best option. Kakashi grinned. They're the most varied. After all, Guy uses ninjutsu. Lee uses taijutsu. Tenten is a weapons mistress, and Neji uses the gentle fist. Suki said, Yeah, your taijutsu is quite a formidable discipline, adding that it was challenging even when I tried different techniques. I suppose I'm more accustomed to my rivals staying grounded and not leaping very high. That's for sure, Sokka said. I can't believe your chakra allows you guys to do that. From what I've observed from your, he ceased to think, anecdotes, you, Aang are the only one capable of jumping like we do with chakra. Yes, since I am an airbender, Aang said with a nod. However, that does not preclude Toph and Katara from accomplishing the same goal. To accomplish this, they will simply utilize their own resources. Have you guys tried molding your chakra? Kakashi asked, nodding once more. We haven't trained in it yet. Guy was going to start teaching us when they got a mission, said Aang and Katara, glancing at Sokka and Suki. How about you? He asked, glancing at Katara and Aang. We decided not to since we already can bend, they said, shaking their heads. That's understandable, he said. Well, until I get called away, which won't be for a very long time again, I can train you who want to learn about chakra control if you wish. That would be fantastic. Suki grinned. Well, I suppose I'll see everyone at the training grounds early in the morning. Say, 9 o'clock? He inquired. As agreed, we will see you at 9, Aang said. He then departed, once again leaving them alone. The following morning, at 10, Kakashi was still nowhere to be found. Sokka spat out, so much for training. At least Lee or Guy was always on time, as she threw a kunai knife at a tree. Suki concurred, saying, the whole team Guy was always on time. Katara was attempting to maintain a positive attitude by saying, he probably had a reason. This is a ninja village, maybe something came up. In a puff of smoke, Kakashi reappeared an additional hour later and said, I apologize for being late. I ran into an elderly woman who required assistance carrying her groceries. When she felt him, Toph responded almost immediately. Kakashi saw her and grinned after his brief speech, but he was only able to avoid one rock jut while the other entangled his leg. It's not every day someone is able to trap me. Nice work, he said. Well, I'd keep you there all day, but since Suki and Snoozles have done nothing but complain, I'll let you up, she said with a smirk. Kakashi straightened up and looked around him. Well, let's not waste any more time, he said. Please, Suki, Sokka. They looked at him, but they shrugged and moved on from the others. Kakashi taught them the fundamentals of chakra control, which they found hard to understand because they couldn't shape their chakra no matter what kind of guidance or advice they received from their teacher. Kakashi chose to learn more by removing his headband and exposing his Sharingan. They do have a decent amount of chakra, he mused, they just aren't able to access it like Lee. Strange, they are doing everything right, their levels are perfect, body chakra is activated, it should be working, is it because they aren't benders? He glanced over at Aang and found him meditating by the river. Katara was bending gracefully while Toph was concentrating on something while she gripped her metal rods. Aang has an extraordinary amount of chakra, probably because he's the Avatar. Cosmic energy, as he's explained it, power from the universe, that much chakra, haven't seen or sensed this much since I've met Naruto and Gaara. But they both possess, or Naruto still is containing the 9 tails. Are they the same power or at least similar? But if Naruto loses the demon's power, some of his chakra will be depleted. Just like with Gaara, but with Aang, he was born as this avatar. With this power, it wasn't placed in him. The benders in general seem to have more chakra than the others, probably because they can use a specific element. As Kakashi was about to recover his eye, he noticed something and concentrated harder to see the chakra signature. It was Naruto, who was sitting in a tree about 500 feet away and watching in silence. Kakashi sighed and recovered his eye to see the warriors focusing once more. Tsunade Ba-chan claims that Naruto was preparing a surprise attack because he wanted to test them. Aang appeared to be taking a break, while Toph was just standing motionless. Based on what he could see, it appeared that they were training to shape chakra. As he braced himself against the tree, he shot out, not realizing that both Toph and Aang had sensed his approach and that Katara had a cunning way of threatening her husband once he was out of the trees. Naruto had to make a shadow clone in order to dodge the incoming rock with astonishing accuracy. Once he threw his real body out of the way, he was instantly caught and frozen. With his eyes closed, Aang grinned and said, well, hello Naruto, we didn't know you were back. Hey. With difficulty, he grumbled, how did you guys detect me? Toph explained, tapping her rods for emphasis, I felt the trees shaking in a not-so-random pattern, and since there isn't any wind today, I knew it had to be a person. Katara unfrozen him and apologized, saying, sorry, mine was just instinctive. With a little grunt, Naruto plunged into the water below, then waded back out and flopped directly in front of Aang. You didn't even move, Naruto said. Aang grinned and looked at him. I didn't need to, as you can see, she said. Yeah, reminds me. Naruto trailed off after returning it. As far as Aang could see, he was a failure, and his new expression of longing, defeat, and most importantly, pain, brought back memories of the war and his own feelings of failure. He muttered, closing his eyes once more, those feelings, they're unbearable. For a brief moment, Naruto's eyes widened as he gazed at Aang. His expression had changed from serene to tense. He started, but someone else's shouting interrupted him. Naruto. Sakura waved at them and called out, hey, Sakura-chan. He faked a smile and waved in return. Sakura grinned at everyone and said, I came over with our new teammates because I heard they were training over here, before pointing to the 2 men she was with. This is Yamato, our captain for the final mission, she said, and this is Sai. Katara greeted them both with a pleasure to meet, and shook their hands. Yamato grinned and said, likewise, Sakura and Naruto have told me about you. Sai said, hello. Grinning, Yamato turned to face Kakashi and said, looks like you're doing some chakra training here. Yes, but it appears they might be experiencing the same issue as Lee, Kakashi said with a nod. Both Suki and Sokka were sitting on the ground, irritated. It appears that they possess the chakra, but they are unable to access it, Kakashi said. Aang became alert. You said it was blocked? Everybody turned to stare at him. Sokka complained, you don't have to brag, Aang. He went on, remember when I went to see that guru at the Eastern Air Temple? Well, I might be able to help you. Sokka's eyes were furrowed as she said, yes, and you lied saying you mastered the avatar state. Aang grinned once more and said, well, the training I received was the opening on my chakra paths. With wide eyes, Sokka said, and you've been waiting for us. How did you accomplish that? Suki's eyes brightened. Well, you have to meditate, then go through the correct process of learning and accepting truths about yourself. Tell us how to do it and stop talking in a mystical way. Sokka approached and took a seat directly in front of Aang. He breathed deeply. First you need to learn to meditate, and do it correctly before you can even attempt to open your chakras. Sokka sat exactly like Aang, with his hands resting lightly on his knees and his legs crossed. Okay, let's do it, he said. What does opening chakra paths mean to you? Sakura inquired. Prior to this procedure or training, I could only enter the avatar state when I was under a lot of stress or when I was experiencing strong emotional triggers. However, after completing this training, I was compelled to face aspects of myself that had obstructed my energy flow, or chakra. Although, Aang clarified, I was able to freely enter the avatar state after I had opened all of my chakra paths. Okay. Sokka interrupted him once more, I'm sorry, but I want to get started right away if this can help Suki and me or even any of you especially since it's clear that you guys are ahead. I think you're right, Sokka, the only way to learn is to do, smiled Kakashi. Kakashi-sensei. Are we going to practice that new training you promised? Inquired Naruto. Yes, Kakashi said with a nod, but we'll need more room than this. Let's go to Training Ground 6, where we can practice in a pleasant, spacious meadow. We'll accompany you, Aang said as he stood up and stretched. Oh, one more thing, Yamato replied. Hokage-sama wishes to see our guests' talents firsthand since their training. Kakashi said, I thought she would, and nodded. Why? Suki inquired. Mostly to determine your strengths for herself, and whether or not you're prepared enough to leave the village, replied Yamato. Sakura laughed, asking, What's so funny? Katara inquired. Nothing, she replied, just that if I know my master, I think she just wants to watch so she'll say anything. Sai was the only ninja who did not giggle. What's so amusing? He inquired. Hang around with us long enough, Naruto laughed, you'll see what we mean about Ba-chan. They sat in a circle with enough room between them, and Aang saw that Suki, Toph, Katara, and Sokka all had their eyes closed in concentration. Suki and Katara appeared to be most at ease, while Sokka's and Toph's heads were slightly wrinkled. Aang said, Calm down, Sokka, you can't force this. He breathed deeply, we've been at this 2 days and nothing. Relax and be calm. Don't try anything yet, this is essential if you want to open the chakra pathways. Sokka inhaled deeply and exhaled gradually. Aang grinned and said, Better, glancing at Toph. I could say the same thing to you, Toph. She remarked, I just find this silly. Remember how hard it was for me to learn earth bending? This might be hard for you too, he said to her. Whatever, I don't even know why I'm doing this. Suki said, to get stronger, right, with her eyes still closed. If this will even work, retorted Toph swiftly. If it doesn't, then just continue on what you were already doing, Katara replied. All right, I'll try harder, Toph sighed. They all had regular heartbeats in a matter of minutes after Aang sat and focused on their bodies. That's it, guys, he exhaled. Now just listen, feel, take in your surroundings, let your soul connect to the world around you. Toph laughed. I know, Toph, but try to not be so concrete about it, pretend you're floating. Oh dear, was her sardonic sigh. Everybody laughed at her. While his 200 clones were busy attempting to cut a leaf in half, Kakashi was explaining the more intricate workings of his element, wind, across the field when a sudden shout of victory filled the air. Kakashi-sensei! Naruto shouted while displaying all of his chopped leaves. Putting down his book, Kakashi congratulated Naruto, saying, Good job, now end the jutsu and collect all the knowledge. After complying, Naruto fell from exhaustion a moment later, but Kakashi caught him on his back and placed him gently on the ground. Yamato noticed a group of people approaching their location just as Naruto was regaining consciousness. Kakashi-senpai, he said, nodding to the guests. Kakashi turned to face the silent and motionless gang and said, Seems it's testing time. What is the duration of their stay there? Naruto followed their gaze and inquired. To which Kakashi replied, About the same amount of time that you have been training. He muttered, Seems they're training in easier, as he struggled to stand. Maybe, but it's the first step to accomplish their greater goal, Kakashi said, turning back to face Naruto. The same as the leaf thing? He requested confirmation. Exactly, Kakashi said as he turned to see a large group of people approaching them. Sakura and Sai trailed behind Tsunade and her assistant Shizune, while Team Guy, Team Kurenai, and Team Asuma with their senseis were in front. Word travels fast, Kakashi remarked after seeing the original Inoshika-cho, Jiraiya, Genma, Azumo, Katetsu, and Ibiki. With so many ninjas in the village, did you think they would remain hidden? Tsunade inquired. Ero Sennin. Naruto walked groggily over and exclaimed. How is the training going, Naruto? Jiraiya asked, giving him a harder than needed shoulder slap that made him stagger. Do you need to strike so forcefully? He complained while rubbing his shoulder. Do you need to refer to me as Ero Sennin? He retorted. Naruto said, Yes, because that's what you are, and leapt out of the way to avoid being walloped once more. Are they prepared? Tsunade questioned Kakashi as she observed the group meditating. The man said, I'm sure they will let us know, without moving. At Sakura's voice, she tsked, I can go ask them. Do that since we're all here, she said, giving Sakura a nod. Without saying anything, she approached their group and said, hey guys. Are they anticipating our arrival? Aang asked in a monotone voice. Yes, you have quite a group assembled to watch your performance, basically all the available ninjas who were interested or weren't away on missions, she replied. It was almost uncanny when they all opened their eyes at once, and after a few seconds, they all stood up and stretched independently. Aang took a deep breath and saw that the others did the same. So, which comes first, water or earth benders? Toph stretched and cracked her knuckles as she asked. Katara was the first to respond, saying, you guys go first, I'm not feeling energized yet. Fine by me, Aang said, the group's most vivacious member. All of them paused and gazed at him. What? When he opened his glider and took off, he grinned and said, the energy comes with time. Momo followed closely behind him, and they flew in unison, allowing the wind to carry them around the meadow. He laughed as he did a number of loops while Momo tried to catch him. After a few minutes, he saw Toph moving toward one side of the field, so he dove towards the main group and landed effortlessly in front of the Hokage. Aang said, greetings your majesty, with a slight bow. That title is not necessary, Hokage or Tsunade-sama will be fine, she replied. Alright then Tsunade-sama, I've always been more partial to names than titles myself, he replied. She grinned and said, I believe you're pitting Earth against Toph, am I right? Yes, it will be all Earth, and we'll switch to water sparring once Katara's energy returns. I can use air and fire too, but, he said, pausing his thoughts. But what? Tsunade inquired. Well, Zuko is my firebending teacher, but he's not here and there's not another airbender to spar with, he replied. Tsunade stated without glancing at the Jonin. Well, I'm sure Kakashi wouldn't mind stepping in for fire since I know he's done nothing but read and supervise Naruto's training. Are you sure I don't? Aang asked. Kakashi is one of my strongest shinobis, I'm sure you won't hurt him, she replied. Nodding, Kakashi said, it would be an honor. Are you done twinkle toeing? I'm getting bored waiting for you, Aang said, nodding. Toph shouted. As he gave Katara his staff, Aang rolled his eyes and said, yeah Toph, I'm coming. She told him, blindfold yourself, as she took off her beige tunic and belt. He grinned as he took off his own robe and tied his sash over his eyes. I was going to anyway, I don't want to have too much of an advantage, he said. Katara mumbled to herself, I never get tired of that, as she gazed at his magnificent torso, causing her husband to smile. I'm sure you don't, he said, planting a kiss on her forehead. So, Toph, are we creating a platform or are we simply waiting for someone to give up? As he walked out to stand opposite her, he asked. Isn't she blind? How are they doing that? Azumo inquired. Shikamaru responded, she is, adding that she has the capacity to see through the earth. You're going to witness her true strength. Inoichi furrowed his brows, and Shikaku burst out laughing. When Toph took off her loose clothes, she noticed an increase in a few heartbeats and arched an eyebrow. You guys over there cool it, it's not your first time seeing a woman. Many of the older men laughed at the boys while Kiba and a few others held their breath. Aang chuckled and positioned his right foot slightly ahead of his left in a bending stance, saying, Toph, one day someone is going to catch your eye, then you're gonna have to watch what you say. She dismissed him, saying, yeah keep dreamin', not everyone is gonna have the perfect relationship you and Katara already have, while putting both of her hands out in front of her, head down. Every time one moved, the other would follow suit, and they stood waiting in a pregnant silence broken only by the chirping of birds in the meadow. Why don't you use sneak attacks? She made fun of it. I've learned it's good to change one's methods of attack, especially when battling a familiar partner, he replied. Cryptic as usual. Did you learn that from Zuko? Yep, he kept me on my toes. Not as much as I will today. No airbending, you cheater. She kicked 3 large boulders toward him as her foot slammed into the ground, and Aang made a pyramid to block off the attacks, which she easily avoided, sending them flying back at her. As Aang charged at her, he changed his head and started to send a series of rock juts into the wall. Breaking it, she shifted her balance and shot off into the air, and Aang lost sight of her and remained motionless until she landed on the ground with agility. You've been practicing, he said with a smile. You thought I wouldn't when I started my own school. She returned fire with a few rocks, which he deflected with ease. He said, I guess it's been too long since we've sparred, as he raced directly at her. Ha ha, bring airhead, let's see how much your close-range fighting has improved, she said as she repositioned herself in her close-range fighting position. Just before he got to her, Aang leapt up a rock jut, and she leapt off it, landing next to him and avoiding a punch. She tilted her head in that direction and called out, Pay attention, Lee, you're going to see what I was trying to do to you. Aang grinned and turned to face her. Should we dance? He made fun of it. Shut it, she said smirkingly as she punched him. For the next 10 minutes, they stay within close combat range, with rock juts rising from the ground with every punch and kick, which helped both defensively and with strong force. Suddenly, Aang missed a block that struck him squarely in the chest. Knocking him backward, he regained his footing and felt the bruise start to form. She reprimanded him. You should have seen that. Yeah, he replied while massaging his chest. Katara, don't move or I'll do him more harm than good. She pointed a finger at her and yelled. Despite her desire to move, Katara remained motionless, her eyes fixed on her husband. She complained to him, Come Aang, stop playing around, I'm getting bored. He kicked 2 rocks at her head and said, Who says I'm playing? I've seen you perform better than this, it's infuriating knowing you're holding back. He retorted, Sorry, I don't have the same enthusiasm to show off as you do, to her. Why don't you use the big guns, lies? Why don't you? Weak, 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 weak. Stop it, Toph, he said sternly. What's wrong? Are you afraid? Aang ran to some boulders and did the same just in time to meet her strike, and they held each other at a standoff. Attempting to get the other to budge first, she accused him of putting rock armor around her body before launching herself towards him. This is all you have, come on, she taunted once more. What else would you like? He shouted at her. You're a failure, she called out to him. Hey, Toph. Sokka, Suki, and Katara shouted. Stop talking. He screamed, shattering his armor and sending her hurtling across the field. That's more like it, she said with a smile as she strode over to him. You did that, but why? Angrily, he asked. Because now we can fight for real. Come on, lay it on me. You know I can take it, she stated to him. Aang chose to give it to her, and within 10 minutes, they had changed the terrain significantly, so Aang decided it was time to call it quits. He felt Toph waiting, and then the ground started to rumble, and he could feel rock juts starting to strike beneath him. He timed it perfectly as he leapt as high as he could, using the momentum to fuel it, and he hit the earth like a giant gavel as he felt Toph had only a moment to react, as the uneven ground was thrown up in all directions, and she failed to notice Aang's leap towards her when her softened earth hardened and Aang stood close to her, only her head above ground. Do you give way? His voice was firm and a little frightening as he asked. Hey, she responded. I yield to no one. Aang had to dodge the 2 metal rods she launched with a forceful head twitch, and then she escaped her cage and threw 1 rod to Aang. Alright. You did great with earthbending. As your teacher I'm proud, and now it's your metal bending test, she said to him. Fine. He complained to her. This fight didn't last long because Aang wasn't yet used to fighting with the metal while trying to bend it, but Toph finally hooked him and knelt on his back. She held it between both of her hands like a normal fighting stick, and Aang did the same as the clashing metal sounded around their arena. She slid towards him, and they slid like ice skaters trying to trap the other around the torso, thereby making them drop their rod. Do you give way? She smirked as she asked. He muttered, Sure, I don't have the energy to continue this anyway, as she got up and let him go. In an instant, Katara was at his side, yelling at her. What was that? What are you trying to say? She said naively. She said, You didn't have to push him, after everything, as she started to apply pressure to his chest bruise. Give me a break, Katara. Even you have to admit the fighting was different from before. I had to push him, she replied. You didn't have to act in that manner. She informed her that he would have opened up. Yes, when? They're here to assess his abilities, but guess what, honey, if he refuses to demonstrate them, they can't do that. I saved us the trouble of being doubted, so just thank me and leave me alone. Toph argued before stomping off to adjust the landscape. As Katara healed him, Aang lay on his back with his eyes closed and the sash removed. Sokka approached them and said, She's right, he demonstrated his actual strength after. Katara said, Shut it, Sokka. With firmness Aang agreed. No, they're right, she said. She began, Stop it, there are other ways. However, it was the most effective. He sat up and rubbed the freshly healed area, saying, I was just playing around, not wanting to put anyone in danger. Suki smiled and said, Aang, these people aren't reckless enough to get hurt by simple petty means of a spar. Looking up neutrally, he said, I know, have you moved on from it yet? Toph asked as he approached. He complained, Yes, I'm over it, to her. Good, because nobody wants to see you sulking. Now get up, you have more work to do, she told him. Toph, just stop, Katara told her as he scowled at her, his mouth pressed in a thin line. Her words, No, get up Avatar, were repeated. Don't call me that again, please, Aang said, staring at her. Toph grinned and extended her hand to help him stand up, and he accepted it with a slight smile and said, Thank you. Anytime, she said, giving him a quick tap on the shoulder. Aang and Toph could feel their accelerated heartbeats as their group made their way back to the ninjas who were watching. So, did you like the show, Madam Hokage? Smugly, she asked. It was much enjoyable, although I'm not certain about a few things, Tsunade said, raising an eyebrow at her. If you're questioning my methods, don't bother. Nobody ever seems to enjoy or much less approve of them until they actually see the end result, Toph said. Tsunade noticed that Aang's attitude had changed as she turned to face him. Very well, although please refrain from that method again. It served its purpose, didn't it? Toph laughed. Indeed, after saying, then no need to worry, I proved what I had to and now nobody will question us again. She paraded off to retrieve her clothes and abandoned rods. She's right, Kakashi said. However, was it required? She inquired. Behind her, Jiraiya remarked, of course it was Tsunade. Everyone here could see the game change once she riled him up. Her raven hair hung loosely behind a green and gold headband, and her green clothes accentuated every part of her extremely refined body. In addition to being a powerful earth user, Toph was also stubborn, tough, unrelenting, and beautiful Kiba couldn't take his eyes off of her no matter what. Hinata said, Kiba-kun, jolting him out of his daydream. He said, oh Hinata, concentrating on her. She is pretty, maybe you should, she said with a smile and a hint of blush. After giving her a look that caused her to become silent, Kiba said, no, nothing like that, Hinata. Shino looked at his teammates before looking directly into Kurena's eyes, which were, he assumed, wide with shock from the match. Shikamaru did not show emotion, but neither did his teammates. What was that? With her eyes bulging out of her head, Ino asked. Was that similar to what you saw, Shikamaru? Choji inquired. His response was, not all of it, but pretty close. That was, Sakura began. Something else, said Kakashi. With an infectious smile, Naruto said, I was going to say awesome. Oi, Ba-chan. Can they come on missions now? It's one thing to address me as such in private and another in public, she said, frowning at him. Come on, he said, rolling his eyes, please let them join us, he began pleading. Baka. Sakura struck him, causing him to fall to the ground. Hokage, Aang said, holding Katara on his arm. I hope our performance didn't startle you too much. Tsunade commended him, saying, on the contrary, Aang, it was a stunning performance befitting your own title. The results were exceptional. Even though Toph used a somewhat harsh approach to get you to open up, would it be brave of me to give you some advice? You may, was his response. When fighting against our kind, we are trained to kill, she said bluntly, so the power you just displayed will be necessary for the missions every day. You and your friends won't be spared. Nodding, Aang said, I understand.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.